Hey everyone, welcome to another video on Paranormal M. Tonight I've got more strange stories for you, so get comfortable and settle in. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel, and if these stories help you relax or fall asleep, feel free to share them with a friend who might enjoy them too. We're starting with an experience from the summer of 2023, when a young woman was riding her longboard home in Oregon before sunrise. What happened near an elementary school that morning left her confused, scared, and wondering what she had really seen. I hope everyone sleeps well tonight. Hi everyone. I wanted to share something that happened to me because, honestly, I still don't know what to make of it. I've gone over it so many times in my head, and I keep coming back to the same feeling. Whatever I ran into that night did not feel like a normal person. This happened in the summer of 2023. For a little bit of context, I've had strange experiences for most of my life. I grew up feeling pretty sensitive to spiritual things, and I still think I am. I also live in a town in Oregon that's built on ancestral indigenous land, and I do feel like that matters. There's a certain heaviness in some places here, especially in my neighborhood. I've had weird things happen around this area before, but this one shook me more than anything else. At the time, I was 18, and I was riding my longboard home from my boyfriend Aaron's house. It was around 4 in the morning, so it was still completely dark and quiet. The route home took me past an elementary school, and that school has always felt strange to me at night. I can't really explain it, but the air there feels different, like the whole street is holding its breath. I was riding down the road in front of the school, and I swear there was nobody around. It was one of those empty neighborhood streets where you can hear every little wheel sound, every crack in the pavement, every leaf moving. I looked down for maybe 1 second, maybe not even that long, and when I looked back up, there was suddenly a man standing directly in front of me. I mean directly in front of me. I almost hit him. I was maybe a few inches away from slamming right into him. He was just standing there in the middle of the street, like he had been dropped there out of nowhere. I didn't see him walking up. I didn't see him coming from the sidewalk. He was just there. I stopped so fast I nearly fell off my board. I grabbed it and I looked at him, ready to apologize. But the second I really saw him, this deep fear hit me. Not normal fear. Not I almost ran into a stranger fear. It was something older than that. My whole body reacted before my mind could catch up. His face was wrong. I don't know how else to describe it. It looked almost human, but not quite. Like the features were arranged correctly, but something behind them wasn't working. His expression was completely blank, and his eyes didn't seem focused on me. It was like he was staring through me instead of at me. I blurted out something like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, I didn't even see you, what the hell?" And he didn't react. Not even a flinch. He didn't seem startled that I had almost crashed into him. He didn't answer me. He didn't blink in any way that felt natural. He just stood there, empty and still, like I wasn't even part of what was happening. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. I wanted to leave. Every part of me was screaming to get away, but I was frozen. Then I finally took a couple steps to the side, still watching him, and that's when he started walking. But even the way he walked was wrong. It was stiff and mechanical, almost like he was copying the motion of a person walking without actually understanding it. His pace was strange, too steady, too controlled, like a wind-up figure moving down the road. I always thought that if something creepy ever happened to me, I'd be smart about it. I'd run. I'd get out of there immediately. But in the moment, I just stood there watching him because my brain couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. Once he got a little farther away, I started walking quickly in the opposite direction, still keeping my eyes on him. I didn't want to look away at all. But then I came to this part of the street where the trees cover the street lamp, and it gets really dark. I was already terrified, so I glanced forward for just a second to make sure nothing else was ahead of me. When I looked back, he was gone. Completely gone. There wasn't anywhere obvious he could have gone that fast. The only real option would have been crossing toward the school parking lot, but he would have had to move impossibly quickly to get out of sight in that tiny amount of time. He appeared out of nowhere, and then he disappeared the same way. I don't know what he was. I don't know if he was some kind of spirit, something pretending to be human, or just something I don't have a name for. I've had ghost experiences before, but this felt different. This didn't feel like a normal haunting. This felt like my body recognized danger before I did. So I guess I'm sharing this because I want to know if anyone else has experienced something like this. Have you ever seen a person who didn't feel like a person? Because I still think about that night, and I still can't convince myself that what I saw was human. Hey, I want to share a memory from when I was about 10 years old. We were spending our summer vacation at my grandma's house. You know, the one we call Nani. Those 2 months are some of the most vivid parts of my childhood, mostly because of something pretty unsettling that happened. So Nani lives in this village where there used to be these huge bamboo plantations, like a mini forest starting right from her backyard and stretching out into the distance. Back then, those bamboos were thick and tall, but now, well, they're gone. Around a month into our stay, there was a wedding nearby. Everyone was busy. My parents, cousins, uncles, aunts, even my grandpa. My older brother was off playing with our cousin brothers. That left me and Nani together because I wasn't feeling too great. We weren't exactly alone. There were some distant relatives around, but I barely knew them. So I stuck close to Nani. It was night, and the front yard was lit by a few lanterns hanging from poles. There was also a faint bulb glowing in one of the rooms. We had this bamboo cot right outside, and Nani was sitting there with me on her lap. The music from the wedding was faint in the background, but the crickets were louder. The night breeze was cool, even though it was summer, and it was just the right setting for a nap. I must have dozed off because the next thing I remember was hearing a whisper right by my ear. I thought it was someone calling my name. Honestly, I don't remember the exact word, but I was sure it was my name. When I opened my eyes, Nani wasn't there. I was alone on that cot, surrounded by darkness except for where the lanterns lit up. Then, I heard the voice again. Curious, I stood up and peeked inside the house to see where Nani had gone. But then, I heard the voice coming from the backyard. I could also hear the bamboo stalks rubbing together, like in a storm, but the weather was calm. Now here's where my 10-year-old bravery, or stupidity, kicked in. I decided to go see who it was. No lantern, no backup, just me thinking it was a cousin playing a prank. The backyard was dim and shadowy. I called out, "Who's there?" a few times. Then, I saw it. A tall, dark figure peeking from behind one of the bamboo stalks. It stood as tall as the bamboo itself. Even now, I get chills thinking about how clear that image is in my mind. I called out again, but it didn't move. The backyard was so quiet, except for the wind that seemed stronger than the night's weather should have allowed. Fear started creeping in. I realized how foolish it was to be there alone. I didn't shout this time. Instead, I tried to step back toward the front yard. But every time I took a step back, I heard the leaves rustle, like the figure was stepping closer. I froze. My heart was pounding, sweat trickling down. I closed my eyes tight, and that's when someone grabbed me from behind. It was Nani, holding a lantern, scolding me for wandering off. I opened my eyes, hugged her, tears streaming down my face, and pointed to the bamboo where the figure had been. She shone the lantern there, but there was no one. Whoever or whatever it was, it had vanished. She picked me up and took me inside. I was still crying, and she said she heard me shouting and came looking for me. After freshening me up, she asked if I was sure I wasn't dreaming or sleepwalking. I insisted I wasn't. Then she told me she hadn't heard a child talk about something like this in years, and she warned me never to go into the backyard alone again, not even during the day. And that's the story of the shadow behind the bamboo. Even now, I wonder what it was, but I'm just glad Nani was there when I needed her. I've had a few moments with my daughter that I still don't really know how to explain. One day, I was alone in the car with her. She was still tiny, sitting in her car seat, fussing a little the way babies do when they're uncomfortable or tired. Nothing had been playing through the car audio. No music, no podcast, nothing. And then, out of nowhere, the speaker started playing a woman's voice. It said something like, "She's been sitting in her seat too long." When I looked at the display, both the title and the artist just said, "Unknown." Then it stopped. Nothing played before it, nothing played after it, and honestly, it didn't feel scary. It was strange, absolutely, but not scary. More like the air had briefly opened a tiny door and then shut it again. Another time, I walked into the playroom where my daughter was in her playpen. The TV had been on, but it was asleep on the home screen. Suddenly, it started playing a song. It sounded like a rock band with a male lead singer, and the lyrics were something about looking around and seeing the invisible in the room. I distinctly remember the word shadows being repeated, maybe in the chorus. I'm not saying it was about shadow people or anything like that. I just know that word was in there. The weird part is, I don't even know how to make that TV play music. The screen never changed from the home screen either. I searched for that song for over an hour and a half right after it happened, when the lyrics were still fresher in my mind, and I couldn't find it anywhere. And that's another strange thing. With moments like that, the details start slipping away so quickly. I have a good memory, and when something shocks me, I usually write it down right away. But with this, it's like the words get foggy almost immediately. There have also been little things with the baby monitor. I always seem to wake up right before my daughter does. Not after she cries, not because she makes noise. I just wake up and check the monitor. One night, around 1 a.m, I woke up with this strong feeling that the sound on the iPad baby monitor app wasn't working. My daughter had been sleeping through the night by then, so my husband Darren was annoyed when I woke him up and asked him to fix it. But he did. We got the sound working again, and about 5 minutes later, she sat up and started crying. Her wake-ups aren't predictable. They happen at different times, and when I wake up, she's usually still sound asleep. Her room is soundproofed enough that we don't accidentally wake her, so it isn't like I'm hearing her stir through the walls. Recently, twice, I've heard a little voice say, "Mommy, Mommy," through the baby monitor. But my daughter can't say those words yet. And both times, when I looked, she was visibly asleep. Then shortly after, she woke up. Maybe this next part is just in my head, but when I see her stirring on the monitor at night, if I really focus on her and sort of tell her, silently, that I love her, that I'm here, and that she can go back to sleep, she does. Almost every time. I know that sounds like a tired mother looking for patterns, and maybe that's all it is. I'm a stay-at-home mom right now, so I've always assumed I just know her rhythms better than anyone else. Intuition, pattern recognition, closeness. All of that makes sense. But then something happened recently that made me pause. We met up with one of my husband's friends and their family. They have a child close to my daughter's age, and it was only the second time we'd all spent time together. Before we left, one of the parents looked at me and said something like, "I have to tell you, I've never experienced anything quite like her." I thought this the first time too, but I wanted to be sure before I said anything strange. She feels almost telepathic. She just looks at you, and you know exactly what she needs, like down to specifics. That caught me off guard, because that's how it has always felt to me. I just thought that was because I'm her mother. There was one silly little thing too, though it still sticks in my mind. One day, while my daughter was lying on me nursing and sleeping, I clicked into HBO. She hates when I move, so I was trying not to disturb her. Instead of opening to the last thing we'd watched, it took me directly to an episode of Euphoria called Stand Still and See. That wasn't the last episode watched. It wasn't even the last show watched on HBO. The home screen had been showing something completely different as the most recent thing. And my husband doesn't watch Euphoria. I don't know what any of this means. I'm not trying to make it into something bigger than it is. None of it has felt dark or threatening. It's just strange. Little moments. Voices from speakers. Songs I can't find. Words that disappear from my memory too quickly. Waking before she wakes. Hearing "mommy" before she can say it. And this quiet feeling that, somehow, my daughter and I are tuned to the same invisible station. I heard this story years ago from an elderly night watchman who had worked in Hong Kong back in the early 80s. He was not the sort of man who dressed things up. He did not lower his voice or lean in dramatically. He simply told it the way a person tells you about an old scar, quietly, carefully, and with the feeling that he wished the memory had stayed buried. He said it happened in Admiralty, around 1982. At that time, the whole district was changing. Old lanes were being cleared away. New office towers were climbing into the sky. Shopping arcades, footbridges, underground passages, and MTR entrances were appearing everywhere. Hong Kong was becoming sharper, brighter, more modern. But there was one newly finished commercial building that people whispered about before it had even opened. From the street, it looked grand enough. Glass, concrete, polished metal, all very clean and respectable. But some of the older workers said the land underneath it had a rotten history. They claimed that decades earlier, sometime in the 50s, there had been a hidden place nearby where children were kept and sold. Families had searched the district with faded photographs. Missing posters had been pasted on walls and lampposts. Some children simply vanished and were never found. During construction, the workers supposedly uncovered little pieces of bone in the foundation. Nobody official said much about it. The tower was finished anyway. Before the offices opened and the shops moved in, several guards were hired to watch the empty building at night. One of them was a man named Lau King. He had answered a small newspaper advertisement, nothing unusual. Just night security, decent pay, quiet hours. The other guards included old Uncle Han, who had done this kind of work for years, a round-faced fellow everyone called Big Wah, and another man nicknamed Mr. Tsim Sha Chui, because he always talked about moving there one day. One night, the four of them sat together in the security room and cooked hot pot on a little electric stove. That detail always stayed with me. Not because it is frightening, but because it feels so human. Four tired men in an empty tower, filling the midnight air with steam, broth, jokes, and the smell of food so the silence would not feel so large. Then every CCTV monitor turned to snow. At that same moment, Mr. Tim Sa Choi reached for his throat. He made a choking sound and fell from his chair. They tried to help him, but it was too late. The explanation later was that a small bone fragment had somehow lodged in his windpipe. A freak accident, they said. But the other guards swore that just before the screens went blank, they saw something on one monitor. A child. A little boy wearing red. A few days after that, Uncle Han died at home. His neighbors heard banging and clattering from his kitchen, then nothing. When the police got inside, they found him on the floor beside the stove. The metal around the burners was scorched black, as if fire had burst out from inside the appliance itself. And in the soot, there were tiny handprints. A Taoist priest was asked to come. He said the stove was more than a place for cooking. In a home, it carried the warmth of the family. It was the mouth of life. If something forced its way through that place, then what entered might not be easy to send back. Then the priest looked at Lao King's birth details. His face changed. He told Lao that he had been born under a deeply yin alignment. Yin year, yin month, yin day, yin hour. His wife was pregnant too, and whatever was inside that tower, the priest said, was not really hunting Lao. It wanted the baby. Big Wah was the next to go. He quit the job, packed quickly, and tried to leave Hong Kong for a while. But while driving through a tunnel late at night, his car slammed into the wall. When the authorities checked the footage, the back seat seemed empty. Until one frame. Just one frame showed a red blur behind him. After 3 deaths, the tower's opening was delayed. By then, everyone had a different explanation. Some said the spirits of the missing children were angry. Some said they wanted justice. Others said one child had stayed too long in the dark and had become something else entirely, something that no longer remembered what justice meant. Then the building became worse. Guards began seeing a boy in red reflected in elevator doors. Never directly, only in mirrored surfaces, glass panels, polished metal. The fountain outside the lobby supposedly showed his reflection after midnight, even when no one was standing there. Down in the basement, men heard nursery songs drifting through the corridors, sung by many thin little voices that did not quite match each other. And the elevators kept moving by themselves, always downward, always to B3. The priest told Lao King there was one final way to stop it. He had to seal 3 hidden geomantic gates inside the tower, and he had to destroy the stove in his own home before the thing could use it. But by then, Lao's wife had begun to change. Her skin became pale. Her mouth looked too red. At night, she moved furniture into strange positions and screamed whenever Lao tried to put things back. When he lifted a hammer to smash the stove, she held her stomach and begged him to stop. She cried that he was hurting their unborn child. And Lao stopped. A few days later, the priest was found barely alive. Before he died, he left one message. The bones were in the storm drain on B3. Seal them with blood. So Lao went down alone. He said the basement air was greenish, damp, and heavy. At the end of the corridor stood Mr. Tsim Sha Chui, dead and silent, raising one hand as if calling him closer. Then the elevator doors opened behind him. Children were laughing inside. A little boy in red stepped out. He was smiling much too widely. Lao found the drain. Inside were small, dry bones, brittle as old twigs. He cut his palm and let the blood drip down over them. The boy stopped laughing. Then he whispered, very softly, "At last, your blood belongs to me." Soon after that, Lao's wife went into labor. She gave birth to a child. Whether that child was truly human, nobody could ever say. But for years afterward, guards in that tower claimed the elevators still returned to B3 on their own. Pregnant women said they felt faint inside the mall. Some people reported hearing a child humming just behind their shoulder, close enough to feel the breath, but when they turned around, no one was there. Today, the place is bright, busy, and perfectly ordinary from the outside. But if you are ever in Admiralty, and an elevator begins descending without anyone pressing the button, I would step out before it reaches B3. I've had a number of encounters over the years. Some people might call them contact sessions, downloads, messages, or spiritual interactions. But honestly, all of those words feel a little too small for what it really is. To me, it's less about reaching out to something unknown and more about remembering what you already are: eternal, connected beyond place, not limited by time in the way we usually think. There are so many methods people talk about for making contact with the other side. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. And I don't doubt that many of those people are sincere. But from my own experience, some of those methods can make the whole thing feel more complicated than it needs to be. The first real requirement, at least as I understand it, is simple. You have to genuinely want to know. Not out of curiosity alone, not because you want proof on command, not because the ego is stamping its little paperwork and demanding answers by noon. You have to truly want to connect with the phenomenon, with that presence, with whatever name feels closest to the truth for you. And that becomes much easier when you stop asking from fear, control, or ego. There has to be surrender. There has to be an understanding that there is more beyond what we usually see, and that this more is not cold or distant. It feels familiar. It feels like something that has known us longer than we have known ourselves. I believe there is a presence that wishes to interact with human beings who sincerely wish to interact with it. That sincere intention is the cornerstone. From there, it takes practice. Intention, repetition. It's a little like tuning an old radio in the dark. At first there's static, then a tone, then something clear enough to recognize. On this plane, I believe there are two main frequencies. One is doubt-based, restless, mechanical. I sometimes think of it as the old ego system. It runs on imaginary time, dragging guilt from yesterday and anxiety from tomorrow. The ego wants proof immediately. It wants answers now. It wants the mystery to stand under fluorescent lights and empty its pockets. But the deeper self, the one connected to the other side, doesn't work that way. It responds when it is called with honesty and followed with trust. It is not linear. It is patient. It does not insist. It does not shout over you. It simply responds to true intent. Those who learn to align with that frequency and who learn to tell the difference between the ego's noise and the self's quiet signal will begin to notice things. Maybe orbs. Maybe repeated numbers appearing in sets of 3 or more, like 111, 333, 777. Maybe goosebumps, but the good kind. The kind that feel like confirmation passing through the body. And eventually, for some, the signs may deepen. Dreams that feel more real than waking life. Memories that don't seem to belong to this lifetime. Fragments from before this body, before this earth, before the little story we usually call me. There are ways to make this easier, though it remains deeply personal. For me, the hours before dawn have always felt especially open. The world is quieter then. The usual machinery of thought has softened. Nature helps too. Trees, green places, stillness, and water most of all. Rivers, lakes, oceans, even the sound of rain. Water seems to carry something. It quiets the mind and sharpens the unseen. Why? Because this reality, in some sense, behaves like an electromagnetic field. And during the night, when the outer world rests and the great machine seems to sleep, that presence becomes easier to sense. The same is true around trees and water. They seem to hold a cleaner signal. So my advice is simple. Seek sincerely. Then listen. From ancient times until now, what was true has remained true. The world has always had an illusory quality. Many people sense it, even if they don't know how to describe it. Believer or not, almost everyone has felt at some point that something about this place is strange, incomplete, or not quite what it appears to be. And I'll say this again because it matters. What was true yesterday is still true today. What you are seeking is also seeking you. You were never truly alone. You were only distracted. So step away from the vibration of second guessing. Let doubt pass without letting it lead. Trust the enduring reach of your own consciousness. It can go farther than you were taught. And those who seek truthfully, with an open heart and honest intent, will be answered when they allow themselves to receive it. I'm grateful I've never personally seen anything as terrifying as what my sister has. I'll be honest with you, I've always been the nervous one. I'm the kind of person who hears a noise at night and immediately becomes a statue under the blanket. But my twin sister, Lena, has had strange experiences for years. To give you a little background, we grew up around my grandparents' old house. It was built sometime in the early 1900s, and it had that heavy, quiet feeling old houses sometimes have, like the walls were holding on to things nobody had said out loud in a long time. We later found out that a family who lived there before my grandparents had gone through a terrible house fire, and their young daughter had died in it. But we didn't know any of that when my sister had her first experience. We were about 12 at the time. Lena said she woke up in the middle of the night and saw a little girl beside her bed. She had braids, and she was pretty, almost gentle looking. Her arms were resting on the mattress, and her chin was on top of them, like she was just quietly watching my sister sleep. Lena said the girl was very close. At first, she didn't understand what she was seeing. Then it hit her that this little girl should not have been there. She shut her eyes tight, grabbed onto her blanket, and didn't move. She said the girl didn't feel evil or angry, but just knowing she wasn't supposed to be in that room scared her badly. A few days later, she finally told my grandparents. They said they had never seen anything themselves, but then my uncle, who was only a few years older than us, admitted that he and his girlfriend, who is now his wife, had experienced strange things in that house too. One evening, my uncle was getting ready to go out while his girlfriend waited in the living room. When he came out of the bathroom, she asked him if he had left the water running. He heard it too, so he went back to check. The sink was off. They stood there confused, and then, right before they were about to leave again, they heard the water running a second time. He went back, and this time, the faucet really was on. My uncle has always been the kind of person who tries to find a logical reason for everything, so he didn't make a big deal out of it. But still, it was strange. As the years went on, Lena kept telling our parents things like, "I heard something," or "I saw a shadow in the hallway." My mom never had any paranormal experiences herself, so she usually told Lena it was because she watched too many ghost shows and scary videos. But then Lena started working at a department store in the mall, and the experiences followed her there. She worked at the customer service counter on the 3rd floor. During closing, she usually had to let the other employees out, then wait for the manager and the security guard. That meant she was often one of the only people left in that huge store. At first, she would hear hangers clinking together, even though nobody was supposed to be near the racks. She tried to ignore it. She told herself it was just the building settling, or echoes from earlier in the day. But then one night, while she was closing, she heard noises coming from the offices behind the counter. She asked the security guard to check and make sure nobody was back there before they left. He looked straight at her and said, "Get your stuff. Let's go." That scared her more than the noise did. She asked him again, "What if someone is hiding back there?" And he just said, "Ignore it. Let's go." So they left. Another time, she went into the break room by herself to eat. There was a storage room inside where they kept mannequins, displays, and extra supplies. She had just heated up her food and sat down when she heard the storage room door creak. Then it opened a little. She froze, waiting for someone to walk out. Nobody did. She grabbed her food and left as fast as she could. She said she had chills all over her body, not just from fear, but from that deep, wrong feeling you get when your body knows something is off before your mind catches up. She knew the woman who worked with the security cameras, so later she asked if anyone had gone into that storage room before her and never came out. The woman checked and said no one had gone in, but on the footage, they could see the door open by itself. After that, Lena refused to eat in the break room unless other people were there. And those hangers I mentioned before, they became part of another experience. One night, she was walking down the aisle with the manager and security guard after closing. She was already nervous every time she had to close, so she always stayed close to them. She said she was walking in the middle, between both of them, nowhere near the racks. Then suddenly, her purse got caught on a hanger. They laughed and joked that maybe the ghost wanted her to stay, but Lena didn't think it was funny. To her, it just added another layer to everything that had already been happening. Another night, she was training a new customer service employee. The customer service area was wide, with hallways on both sides leading back toward the offices. There was also a meeting room off to one side. They were getting ready for the last few hours of the shift when suddenly, from inside the meeting room, they heard a loud crash. Then more noise. It sounded like chairs and tables being shoved around, maybe even thrown. Like someone in there was furious. But there was no meeting scheduled. Nobody was supposed to be inside. Lena knew immediately that something wasn't right, but she tried to act calm because the new girl was curious and wanted to go look. Lena told her, "Don't go in there. Just ignore it." The girl kept wondering if maybe someone was inside, and Lena finally said, "If you go in there and something happens, I'm grabbing my stuff and running, so please, just leave it alone." They kept working and never talked about it again. But the experience that really pushed Lena to her limit happened while she was closing with an older coworker who had trained her. Lena liked working with her. She felt comfortable around her. They were closing their registers. Lena was on one far side of the counter, and the other woman was on the opposite side. All of a sudden, the woman screamed. Lena rushed to ask if she was okay, but the woman had gone pale. She looked terrified and didn't want to say what she had seen. Lena kept asking because she knew she was supposed to stay there by herself after the woman left. Finally, the coworker told her there had been a man near Lena. She said he looked wrong somehow, and he was leaning toward Lena like he was about to whisper something directly into her ear. That was it for my sister. She was so shaken that she practically begged the woman to stay and close with her. After that, Lena decided she couldn't keep working there anymore and started looking for another job. As for me, I only have one experience, and it happened a couple of weeks ago. It was a Sunday. My parents and Lena had gone to the hospital so my dad could get checked out, and I stayed home with my brother. We were asleep in the TV room, which has a clear view into the kitchen. At some point, I woke up because I heard something. I'm still not sure if I was half dreaming or fully awake, but I thought I saw a figure move into the kitchen. At first, I assumed my parents had come home, But I kept listening, and I kept watching the kitchen, and slowly I realized there was no one there. I got scared, so I turned around and hugged my brother. 4 days later, my mother passed away. I don't know if what I saw had anything to do with that. I can't say for sure, but it has stayed with me, quietly sitting in the back of my mind ever since. Those are some of the strange things my family has experienced, and even now, I still don't know what to make of all of it. Hi, so I want to tell you about something that stayed with me in a way I still don't fully know how to explain. My experience is tied, at least partly, to having an open mind about reincarnation. Not just the usual idea of a past life, but things like ancestral return, inherited memory, or that strange feeling that something old in your bloodline is somehow still speaking. I know those are big concepts, and people can look them up if they want the deeper explanations, but the simple version is this. I recently uncovered what may have been a past life, or maybe some kind of spiritual connection to an ancestor. And honestly, it was probably one of the least comforting possibilities I could have imagined. I'm a man in my early 40s, and not long ago, I went through the end of a relationship. Nothing supernatural seemed to be happening at first. It was just the normal mess of heartbreak, sadness, disappointment, regret, anger, all of it. But those emotions seemed to open some hidden door in me. Out of nowhere, I started thinking about one very specific man in my family tree. I barely knew anything about him. Just a few census records, a couple of military index entries, the bare bones of a life. I knew he had lived in Baltimore County, Maryland during the Civil War, and that he had served with the 7th Maryland Volunteers in the Union Army. That was about it. I live in Maryland too, though in a different county. Most of my older family came from Baltimore or nearby areas, not from the part of Maryland where I grew up. So this man wasn't someone I had grown up hearing stories about. He wasn't family lore. He was just a name on paper. But after that breakup, he came to mind with this strange urgency. It felt almost like waking up with the sudden need to call someone. Not casually, urgently. Like something was pressing on my shoulder. At first, I thought maybe I was just looking for a distraction from feeling miserable. And honestly, that would have made sense. Research can be a shelter when your heart is making too much noise. But the feeling kept getting sharper. It didn't feel random. It felt connected to what I was feeling, in a way I couldn't name yet. So I started digging into this relative, Jonas Thomas Kelbaugh, who lived from 1840 to 1908. Now, I should say this part clearly. I'm trained in genealogical research. I have a certificate in it, a graduate degree in library science, and years of experience working with records, archives, and family history. So when I research, I'm not trying to force a story onto the evidence. I don't like bending facts until they fit feelings. But what I found was strange, because the facts started echoing my emotions. Jonas had enlisted in the Union Army, and from what I could piece together, it may have been partly because he wanted approval to court the woman he later married, Bethany Ann Schaefer. Bethany had already been treated as a source of shame in her family because she had a child outside of marriage, and the man involved never married her. Her father was protective of her, maybe even fiercely so, and he was also a strong Union supporter. He believed the rebellion had to be put down by force. Jonas worked as a stonemason and spent time on his uncle's farm in Carroll County, Maryland. That uncle lived near Bethany's father, and Jonas appears to have done some work around the Schaefer farm too. So I began to see the shape of it. A young man, trying to prove himself, trying to become acceptable in the eyes of the woman's family. He enlisted in August of 1862. He joined Company D of the 7th Maryland Volunteers, alongside neighbors and relatives. Soon after, he marched toward the front, not long after the Battle of Antietam. But after several months, whatever noble or romantic reason had carried him into the army seemed to collapse under the reality of war. He had likely seen frightening action during the Confederate retreat after Antietam. Then winter came. Christmas came. Homesickness must have pressed down hard, and Jonas deserted. He left with a small group of other soldiers and made the long journey back home, roughly 70 miles or so. To avoid being caught, he hid out near his uncle's farm, close enough to Bethany that he could reconnect with her. From what I can tell, he presented himself as if his enlistment had simply ended. But it hadn't. He was absent without leave, and by the spring of 1863, he was officially listed as a deserter. Jonas and Bethany married on July 19, 1863. By then, he was working with her father and trying to build some kind of future, possibly earning an interest in the farm through his labor. For a while, maybe the war felt far away, out there in the countryside. But his name was circulating on deserter lists. Someone may have informed on him, possibly even another man connected to Bethany's past. In April of 1864, Jonas was arrested. He was court-martialed and sentenced to 1 year of imprisonment at Fort Delaware. Part of his punishment was being forced to wear a ball and chain, and the part that truly stopped me cold was this. His prison sentence began on July 19, 1864, his first wedding anniversary. That was when something in me just went quiet. The loss, the shame, the anger, the helplessness, the feeling of being separated from someone you love right when you thought your life was beginning again. It was all too close to what I had been feeling. Not identical in circumstance, of course, but emotionally, it struck the same deep bell. And I discovered this on the 160th anniversary of his imprisonment. That detail still unsettles me. I wasn't looking for it because of the anniversary. I didn't plan it. I simply followed the pull, and there it was, waiting. There's another part too. Jonas is buried in a cemetery about a mile from my childhood home. My family had no idea we had roots in that county going back that far. We thought of ourselves as Baltimore people, city people. None of my older relatives knew about these connections. It was just too far back, just outside living memory. But when I was a kid, I used to ride my bike to that cemetery. I was drawn to it for reasons I couldn't explain. There was a Revolutionary War soldier buried there, Captain Jonathan Murray Sr., with a historical marker on his grave. When I was 9 or 10, I used to visit that headstone like it was part of some private adventure. Years later, I found out that Captain Murray had been a neighbor of one of my ancestors, Henry Kelbaugh. Their names appeared close together on the same census page from 1820. So the place I felt drawn to as a child wasn't random after all. Or at least, it doesn't feel random now. Jonas did survive the war. He and Bethany remained married afterward, and it seems they built a life together. But the pain of what happened to him, the consequences of fear and youth and bad decisions, the humiliation of imprisonment, all of that reached across time in a way I still don't fully understand. I'm not saying with certainty that I was him. I don't know that. But I do feel, deep down, that I somehow knew the story before I knew the facts, and I can't shake the feeling that I was led to find it. I still remember how big those little paranormal games felt back in middle school. This was the early 2000s, so everybody had some kind of schoolyard legend they believed in, or at least pretended not to believe in. Kids were folding paper fortune tellers and asking who they were going to marry. People were twisting paper clips into little dowsing rods and using them to ask questions about crushes, friendships, all that awkward middle school stuff. But there was one game everybody knew: Bloody Mary. and for some reason, my friends and I decided we were finally going to try it. There were 3 of us that day, and the strange part is that we all had almost the same first name. I'll call myself Aaron here, and the other 2 were Ari and Aaron. At the time, that felt important somehow. We had heard all these rumors that rituals were stronger when 3 people did them together. You know how kids talk. Someone always has a cousin or an older sibling who knows something. So after class one afternoon, we went into one of the school bathrooms. We checked the stalls first. Every single one. Nobody was in there. Then we closed the door, pulled the little window shutter so the room got darker, and turned off the lights. It wasn't pitch black, but it was close. The only thing I could really make out was the faint shape of the mirror above the sinks. The 3 of us stood there shoulder to shoulder, staring into it. And before we even said anything, I remember feeling wrong about it. Not scared exactly, at least not at first. More like the air had gotten heavier, like we had stepped into a place that didn't want us making jokes anymore. Then we started saying it together. Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. For a few seconds, nothing happened. No face in the mirror, no shadow behind us, no hand on the glass, nothing. And honestly, I think we were just about to laugh it off. That nervous kind of laugh kids do when they're relieved but don't want to admit they were scared. Then something crashed behind us. It came from one of the stalls. It was loud, sharp, metallic. The only way I can describe it is this. It sounded exactly like a big knife hitting the tile floor, then bouncing. Clang. 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 The sound echoed through the bathroom, and all 3 of us turned around at the same time. Nobody was there. No one had come in. No one had walked out. We had checked the stalls ourselves, and whatever made that sound, it had happened inside the bathroom with us. For maybe 1 second, we all just froze. Then we ran. Not gracefully either. We shoved past each other, slipped on the floor, grabbed at the door, and basically spilled out into the hallway like the bathroom itself had spit us out. None of us went back in to investigate. Not then, not later that day. What still gets me is that we all described the sound the same way afterward. We didn't have to explain it to each other. We all heard the same thing. A heavy metal blade hitting the floor. Years have passed, and I still don't know what it was. Maybe it was fear. Maybe our imaginations filled in the blanks. Maybe the building made some weird noise at the worst possible moment. But I know what I heard. And I know I wasn't the only one. Hey, I want to share with you a story from a few years ago. Something that still gives me chills when I think about it. So, back when I was 18, my friends and I decided to take a trip to a rural village to unwind. My late grandparents had a house there, nothing fancy, but it felt like the perfect escape from city life. We packed up, took a 2-hour drive, and then walked for about half an hour to reach the village. It was bigger than I expected, with chickens, goats, and dogs roaming freely. A real countryside vibe. We settled into the house and spent the first day resting. The next morning, we planned to visit this scenic spot my dad had told me about. We packed water but forgot food, thinking the trip would be short. After about 30 minutes hiking through some dense woods, we arrived at this breathtaking clearing with a huge tree and a stunning view. But, being young and curious, we kept exploring and lost track of time. Ended up spending an extra hour and a half wandering around. When we decided to head back, things got weird. We tried retracing our steps, but no matter how fast we walked or jogged, we couldn't find that big tree again. Panic started setting in. Then, out of nowhere, An old woman appeared on the trail. We asked her how close the village was, and she said we'd been heading the wrong way. The village was still a 3-hour walk away. 3 of us were barely able to stand at that point, so when she offered us shelter and food, we were hesitant but eventually agreed. Her cabin was small but clean, with a little garden and a goat tied outside. Inside, the furniture was old but tidy. She served us plates filled with chicken, veggies, salad, and tea. Everyone except my friend Adam and me ate eagerly. Adam was suspicious, not touching the food or tea, and I was torn between my hunger and caution, but eventually gave in. After eating, the woman excused herself to rest, and one by one, we all fell asleep on those hard sofas. I set an alarm to wake us after 30 minutes. Adam decided to stay awake and watch around. Suddenly, I was jolted awake by worried faces. It was sunrise, but Adam was nowhere to be found. We called for him, but no answer. I went to check the woman's room where she had gone to sleep. But the room was empty. No bed, no furniture, just 4 bare walls. The kitchen was empty too. My phone was dead, and all our phones had lost power somehow. We ran towards the village, calling Adam's name. When we finally reached some neighbors, they looked scared and asked, "Where have you been for the past 3 days?" Turns out, we had been missing for 3 days. My parents were worried sick, had called the neighbors, and even reported me missing. The whole village had been searching. They took us to the local mosque, where the imam suggested it might be witchcraft. We went back with some men to search for Adam near the cabin, but found no trace. Even the police couldn't find anything. To this day, I wonder what really happened. Why was Adam the only one to disappear? Was it because he didn't eat, or because he was exploring the cabin? A part of me wants to go back, to uncover the truth, but every time I think about that place, I'm gripped by a deep fear. I don't know if that woman was some kind of witch, or if something else was going on, but it's a mystery that still haunts me. Hey, I want to share a couple of experiences that have really stuck with me. Stuff that's a little out there, but felt so real. So, a while ago, my partner and I moved into this old mansion that's been converted into apartments. It dates back to the mid-1800s, and yeah, people say it's haunted. I've always been sensitive to energy and the paranormal, but this place surprised me. From the moment we stepped in, I sensed a presence. This young woman in a purple lace dress with brown hair and eyes, and an older lady at the staircase, dressed in black, looking quite stern. I even had dreams about a man with a black beard and green eyes, and a little toddler in overalls. Seems like a family once called this place home. We've heard knocks, seen things move, and once, while playing video games with friends, the TV turned off, then back on, almost like it was responding. We burned Palo Santo and used black salt around the windows to keep things calm. But one night, during a thunderstorm, my baby was restless, so we put him in his crib. When I checked the baby monitor, I saw strange orbs moving near him. It got really cold suddenly, even though we were in a heat wave, and the salt lamp flickered. I felt a sad, cold energy from the corner of his room, so we brought him back to the living room. The orbs stayed on the monitor even after. A friend analyzed the footage and saw faces, an adult man, 2 women, and a child. It was eerie, but also kind of beautiful in a strange way. Then there's this other story from a friend who works nights alone at a slaughterhouse in Wyoming. He started noticing noises, shadows, and even whispers when he was by himself. One coworker told him the place is lively before anyone arrives. My friend joked with the spirits, asking them to give him space since he needed to work, but that only seemed to stir things up more. He'd see figures out of the corner of his eye and once heard footsteps right behind him, though he knew it probably wouldn't stop anything. Even after work, He felt like something was following him. He's scared, but isn't ready to quit because the job has really helped his life. He just wishes the spirits could leave him be. And lastly, there's this basement in my family home that's always given me the creeps, even though I don't really believe in ghosts. It's peaceful overall, but there's one room, the gaming room, that makes my heart race whenever I'm near it. It's like this invisible weight or tension sits in the air. I'm not sure what it is, but it's enough to make me anxious every time I pass by. So, yeah, maybe these things can't be explained fully, but sometimes the feelings and signs are impossible to ignore. Have you ever felt something like this in a place you live or work? It's strange, but it also makes you wonder about the stories that old walls could tell if they could speak. Listen, I know not everybody wants to watch a whole video, and that's fine. But if you don't watch the full thing, at least hear the beginning and the end, because I really wanted to clear something up once and for all. I've seen a few people saying I use AI to edit my videos. Some people have even said my whole channel is AI, which honestly blows my mind. I don't really know how someone can sit through one of my videos and come to that conclusion, but apparently some people are determined to see things that way. And the bigger thing is, people are so quick now to call hard work AI. It's like the second something looks clean, edited, or a little different, somebody jumps in and says, AI. A lot of people aren't even forming their own opinion anymore. They see a trend online, they see other people saying it, and they just follow along because they think it makes them sound clever. I get it. People always say not to feed the trolls, and I try not to. But I'm being honest, it gets frustrating after a while. So I decided to record myself editing one of my upcoming videos, the one I'm planning to post soon, because I thought maybe it would help to actually show the process. And honestly, some of you might find it interesting too, because creators don't always show what happens behind the curtain. AI bothers me because it takes credit away from people who are really putting in the time. There are people filming, editing, adjusting sound, color grading, writing descriptions, coming up with titles, and doing all of that by hand. Then AI can spit something out in under a minute, and suddenly people start accusing real creators of doing the same thing. From what I've seen, you can usually still tell when something is AI. Something moves wrong, something passes through a body, the physics look strange, or there's just that weird, unnatural feeling. I haven't really seen a full 5 or 10-minute video yet that is completely AI and perfectly patched together without obvious mistakes. I'm also hoping the mods over on Paranormal site can keep paying attention to this kind of thing, because that's where I post most of my content, and that's where I see a lot of those comments calling my work AI. I also see this as a teaching moment, not just for me, but for anyone watching. For the people who are quick to call something AI, please slow down. Stop following the crowd for 2 seconds and actually look at the video. Analyze it. Think about it. Don't just drop a comment on someone's work when you don't really know what you're talking about, because that kind of comment can hurt someone's credibility. Other people see it, believe it, and then they don't even bother watching the video for themselves. That's not fair, especially when it happens to a smaller creator who is just trying to build something. I don't know if it comes from jealousy, boredom, or just wanting attention, but trying to damage a random person's reputation like that is a really ugly thing to do. Anyway, for the people who actually watch the whole video and read this, I genuinely like to hear your thoughts. And if you're a creator too, I'd like to know how you feel about AI. For me, I don't use AI in any part of my process. I film my own content. I edit my own content. I write my titles. I write my descriptions. I color grade my videos. I put the whole thing together myself. And it's frustrating when, instead of getting any credit for that, I get accused of taking shortcuts. Still, I hope you enjoy the video, whether you're here to support it or just to hate watch it. The trolls have to eat too, so I guess I serve dinner tonight. And just for fun, I'm aiming for -100 downvotes on this post. Think we can make it happen? I'll even start it off myself. All right, later. Hey, I want to share something personal that's been weighing on me for a while now. There's this one room in our basement. I used to think it was just my imagination or leftover fears from childhood, but lately, it's been a different story. I always felt like someone was in there, watching or waiting. For the longest time, I convinced myself I was just being paranoid. The strange thing is, my partner Lily feels the same way about that room. The first time she stayed over, we went down to grab some drinks, and when we got near that door, she just froze. She said she didn't want to go in and would wait for me outside. At first, I thought maybe she just didn't like basements. But then, a few months back, when I finally told her about my feelings, she immediately said, "You mean the room right across the stairs?" That's the gaming room. I asked how she knew, and she said she felt something there too. She mentioned seeing shadows flicker at the edge of her vision. What freaked me out was that I'd never told anyone about this room before. It's getting harder to ignore. The shadows seem more real, and I hear soft tapping on the door sometimes, like someone or something is trying to get my attention. I'm trying to tell myself it's just my mind playing tricks, but honestly, it's starting to mess with me. I'm desperate for advice on how to face this fear and maybe even understand what's going on. Because if this keeps up, I don't think I'll ever go down to the basement again. And that thought, it's just not okay with me. Hey, I want to share some stories from my family about our house. The one we believe is haunted. It's been a bit unnerving, but also strangely fascinating. First, there's my stepdaughter, Maya. She lived with us for about a year, in the room where our son sleeps now. One night, she went to shower and ended up having a conversation with a woman she thought was me. The door was closed, but the voice sounded just like mine. She chatted for about 20 minutes, thinking I was sitting on her bed. What's wild is, my husband and I were right there in the living room with our son watching TV the whole time. When Maya came out, she even told me it was rude to just walk off mid-conversation. We assured her I hadn't left the couch once. Then there's my husband's experience. This happened when our son was just a toddler, around 3 or 4. After I had a car accident, my mom came to pick up me and the little guy. My husband came home, knowing I wasn't there, but he saw a woman who looked just like me enter our bedroom. He talked with her for a few minutes while sitting in the living room. When he got up to join her, she vanished. Then, the paperwork he'd left on the table was found torn to pieces. It was unsettling. My oldest sister, Clara, had her own strange moment. Her daughter was visiting us for the summer and stayed in our son's room. One night, Clara woke up feeling really uneasy and saw a little girl sitting quietly in the corner, elbows on knees, hands on her face, just staring at her. Our son had called this mysterious figure Little Sarah. Clara covered herself with the blanket and prayed, feeling like time stretched forever. When she finally peeked, the girl was gone. But then, when Clara went to the bathroom, she looked into our room and saw that same little girl squatting in the corner there. Clara didn't go back to the bathroom that night and stayed under the covers until morning. And just last night, at around 4:45 a.m., our son woke me up asking what I had been whispering to him. I told him I hadn't said anything. My husband, who leaves for work at 4 a.m., and our son, Both saw me pick up the AirPods our son dropped and put them back in the case. Our son went back to bed, but woke up again at 4:25, coming out to ask where his other AirPod was. We had just seen me put both AirPods in the case, but one was mysteriously lying on the floor. None of us had touched it since. These moments make the house feel alive in a way that's hard to explain. It's spooky, yes, but also a part of our family story now. Thanks for listening. I came across something today called the Hat Man phenomenon, and I have to be honest, it unsettled me more than I expected. The reason it got to me is because I saw something very close to that when I was a child, long before I had any idea people talked about things like this. I must have been around 6 or 7 years old. Back then, my parents were involved in mission work, so our family moved around quite a bit. We lived in different places, sometimes in very simple homes, and for a while we stayed in this small wooden cabin-style house that had been arranged for us. It was a modest little place, and one detail I still remember clearly is that the bathroom was not inside the house. It was in a separate little structure just behind it. So at night, whenever my siblings or I needed to use the bathroom, we would wake up one of our parents and ask them to come with us. It was only a short walk, maybe a few steps really, but when you're a kid and it's dark outside, a few steps can feel like crossing a whole forest. One night, sometime around 1 in the morning, I woke my mother because I needed to go. The sky was clear, and there was one of those old yellowish fluorescent porch lights glowing outside. This was in the 90s, so everything had that dim, strange, almost dusty kind of nighttime look. After I finished using the bathroom, my mother said she needed to go too, and she told me to wait outside for her. So I stood there alone, just looking around the yard. That was when I noticed something at the front corner of the house. It looked like someone was peeking around the edge. At first, I thought it was a man wearing a hat. I could only see the head and the hat coming out from behind the corner. The hat looked something like a fedora, and the shape of the face had this sharp jawline. But the whole figure was completely black. Not dark-skinned, not hidden in shadow, but black like a cutout. Like a person-shaped absence. There were no eyes, no mouth, no nose, nothing. No face at all. And still, somehow, I knew it was looking directly at me. The strange part was the light. That yellow porch light was bright enough to show the plants and leaves behind it, but none of that light touched the figure. It did not reflect anything. It did not reveal any detail. It was just there, perfectly dark. I was scared, but not in the way I probably should have been. At the time, I thought maybe it was one of the older neighborhood kids trying to scare me. That kind of thing happens sometimes, so my first thought was not ghost or monster. I thought it was a prank, so I called out to it. It did not answer. I called again. Still nothing. It did not move. It did not flinch. It just stayed there, staring at me without eyes. And then, for reasons I still do not fully understand, I decided the best thing to do was run straight at it. So I charged toward the corner of the house. As I got closer, the figure seemed to shrink. I do not know how else to describe it. It was not backing away exactly. It was more like it was folding down into itself, becoming smaller and flatter. By the time I reached it, it looked almost two-dimensional, like a shadow pressed against the ground. Then it slid into the shadow of a chair on the porch and disappeared. Just like that. Gone. I immediately turned and ran back to my mother. A little while later, I looked toward that corner again, and there was absolutely nothing there. No person, no movement, nothing that could explain what I had seen. I told my mother about it, but she brushed it off as imagination. And honestly, I understand why she did. I was just a kid. It was late, and children see strange things sometimes. But I never forgot it. That image stayed with me for years. The black shape, the hat, the feeling that it was watching me. And here is the part that bothers me most. I did not grow up in the West, and as a child in the 90s, I had not been exposed to horror characters like Freddy Krueger or anything like that. I had no reason to imagine a shadowy man in a hat. Then today, completely by chance, I watched a video about the Hat Man phenomenon, and I learned that people from different parts of the world have described seeing almost the same thing. I am not saying what I saw was supernatural. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe it was my imagination. Maybe it was something ordinary that my mind turned into something frightening. But when I heard those descriptions today, I got chills. Because whatever that thing was, I saw it long before I knew it had a name. Hey, I want to share a story with you. It's one of those moments that really changed how I think about the paranormal. So, I'm not someone who grew up fully convinced about ghosts and spirits. Sure, I had some weird things happen when I was a kid, like once waking up to this shadowy figure at my bedroom door, or another time seeing what looked like a man in a white robe on the beach from our vacation condo window. I told my parents, but when they came to look, he was gone. I always thought maybe it was just my imagination or my eyes playing tricks. Fast forward to college, I was living in a dorm, and there was this well-known story about a woman who'd been murdered there years before. One night, I was alone in my room when I heard a woman whisper my name right next to the wall. I asked my friends if they heard anything, but they didn't. I assumed I was just tired or maybe had been drinking. But then, a few years ago when I was about 28, something happened that I couldn't explain away so easily. I was working as a waitress at this bar and restaurant, and on my first day, the woman training me mentioned the place was haunted by 3 spirits: an old man, a little boy, and a woman. She said the boy even followed her home once and became friends with her daughter. I was skeptical, of course. One night I was at home, getting ready to go out, and my friend was just hanging out on my bed. I was listening to music on my phone, just relaxing since I'd called off work. The carpet in my room is really thick, and the door is heavy. It doesn't just move on its own. But out of nowhere, I heard it creak like someone was opening or closing it. I whipped around, thinking maybe my parents had come home early, but no one was there, and the door was still. My dog was asleep at my feet, and no windows were open. I asked my friend if she saw the door move, and she said she thought so, but didn't want to admit it. We shrugged it off, but then 10 minutes later, when I turned off the music to go feed my dog, I felt this strange chill as I stepped through the doorway. Suddenly, from the dark bathroom beside me, I heard a muffled female voice say something. I caught only the last word. You. I turned to my friend, hoping she'd say she said something, but she hadn't. She was just as freaked out as I was. Honestly, I grabbed my dog and we got out of the house as fast as we could. When I told the bar owner about it later, she said the usual spirits had been quiet since she got back from a trip. She even mentioned the name Rebecca, the woman spirit training me had talked about, and I haven't seen or heard from her since that night. But I still wonder, what was that voice saying to me? I guess some mysteries just don't have answers. I was 17 when this happened. I'm 26 now, and honestly, I've kept this story to myself for years. Not because I enjoy being mysterious about it, but because whenever I've tried to tell people, they either think I made it up or that I had some kind of sleep paralysis episode. And maybe they're right. I've turned that possibility over in my head more times than I can count. But there's one part of it I still can't explain. Back then, my parents had gone away for a family wedding. I didn't want to miss school, so I stayed home by myself for a couple of nights. The first night was completely ordinary. Nothing strange, nothing worth remembering. The second night was different. At around 11, I did all the usual things you do when you're home alone and trying not to feel home alone. I locked the front door, checked the windows, left a few lights on downstairs, watched videos on my phone for a while, and eventually went up to bed. My bedroom was on the second floor. The bed was against the wall, which meant there was only one open side, and there was only one way in or out of the room. I remember that clearly because later, that detail became the thing I couldn't stop thinking about. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up. Not suddenly, not from a sound. I just opened my eyes. The room was dark, except for this weak amber light coming through the curtains from the street lamp outside. And then I noticed it. Someone was lying in bed beside me. For one tiny, stupid second, my brain tried to make it normal. I thought maybe my mom had come home early and had come in to check on me. But then I remembered. My parents were hours away. I went completely still. The person beside me was turned away from me. I could see long, dark hair spread across my pillow. The shape looked like a woman. She wasn't moving. She wasn't breathing loudly. She was just there. And fear is strange because people always think they know what they do. They think they'd scream, jump up, grab something, run. I did none of that. I just froze. My heart was beating so hard it felt like it was trying to climb out of my throat. I stared at the back of her head for what felt like forever. I kept waiting for her to shift or sit up or do anything at all. She didn't. Eventually, I managed to convince myself that I was dreaming, or half dreaming, or trapped in that weird space between being awake and asleep. So I closed my eyes. I don't know how much time passed after that. Maybe a minute, maybe 10 seconds. Then, I felt the mattress move. Slowly, carefully, like someone was turning over beside me. I opened my eyes again. Now she was facing me. I couldn't see her face clearly. The room was too dark for that. But I knew she was looking right at me. I have never felt anything like that fear. Not before, not since. I wanted to move. I wanted to yell. I wanted to throw myself out of the bed and get to the door. But my body wouldn't listen. Then she whispered, "He's standing behind you." Her voice sounded like a woman's voice. Soft, almost kind, and somehow, that made it worse, because I was facing the wall, which meant if someone was behind me, they were standing on the open side of the bed, between me and the bedroom door, blocking the only way out. I squeezed my eyes shut. I don't know why. Maybe some small, ancient part of my brain thought that if I didn't look, nothing could happen. So I stayed like that, eyes closed, barely breathing, waiting. Eventually, I must have fallen asleep, or passed out. I still don't know which. When I woke up, sunlight was coming through the curtains. The room was empty. No woman, no sound, no sign that anyone had been there at all. I sat up and looked around, half expecting to find something. Hair on the pillow, a footprint, the door open. Nothing. I actually laughed at myself a little. I told myself it had been a nightmare, a really vivid one, but still just a nightmare. Then I went downstairs. The front door was still locked. The windows were shut. Everything looked exactly the way I'd left it. And then, I saw something on the dining table. A photograph. An old printed one, the kind with faded colors and soft edges. I knew I'd seen it before. It had been kept away in one of those family storage boxes for years. In the picture were my grandparents when they were young, maybe in their 20s. And standing beside them was a young woman. Long black hair, a narrow face, dark eyes. I knew her immediately. She was the woman from my bed. I called my mom right away. I tried to sound casual when I asked, "Who's the woman in the old photo with Grandma and Grandpa?" There was this long pause. Then my mom said, "Why are you asking about her?" I told her I'd found the photo on the dining table. Another pause, longer this time. Then she said, "That's strange." I asked her what she meant, and she said, "That photo should be inside the locked trunk in the attic." I went upstairs so fast I nearly tripped. The attic hatch was closed. The trunk was still locked. The key was hanging on the little hook where it had always been. Later, my mother told me the woman's name was Marielle. She was my grandmother's younger sister. She died in 1978. No one in the family really talked about her, mostly because of the way things ended. Apparently, before she died, Marielle kept telling people she could see a man standing behind them. It started quietly at first, a comment here and there. Then it became constant. During meals, during visits, in the middle of conversations. She would suddenly look past someone's shoulder and ask, "Who is that man behind you?" At first, people thought she was joking. Then they thought she was trying to scare them. Then they started thinking something was wrong with her. A few weeks before she died, she told her sister, "The man is getting closer." 3 days later, Marielle was found dead in her bed. They never found a clear cause. My mother gave this little nervous laugh after telling me, like she wanted to make it sound less serious than it was. She said old family stories always grow sharper teeth over time. And I wanted to agree with her. I really did. But then she added one more thing. She said Marielle had a sentence she repeated whenever she became frightened. Something she supposedly said again and again for years. Something she said the night before she died. The same sentence I heard whispered beside me in the dark. "He's standing behind you." I live alone now. Most nights are fine. But sometimes, when I'm up late working and the apartment is quiet, I catch myself checking reflections. Dark windows, the black screen of the TV, mirrors at the end of the hall, anything that might show me what's behind me. I've never seen anyone there. Not once. But every now and then, I get this strange feeling. Not that someone is watching me. That would be easier to explain. It feels more like someone is waiting, patiently, quietly, and somehow disappointed that I still haven't turned around. Hey, I want to share something that's been happening in our home for a few years now. So a while back, my partner and I moved into this new condo. It wasn't anything fancy, just a bit bigger to fit our growing family. Things were a little rocky between us, and even though we separated, we still ended up living together. Yeah, I know, it's not the usual setup, but it worked for us at that time. I was crashing on the fold-out couch, and that's when the strange stuff began. Around 11 or midnight, I'd start hearing noises from the kitchen, like dishes clanking and drawers opening and closing. At first, it was subtle, but it got louder over time. I even managed to record some of it since the couch was right across the hall from the kitchen door. When I played it for my partner, he was skeptical at first, but after sitting with me one night and hearing the sounds himself, he started to believe me. We kind of joked about it, calling it our friendly ghost, making light of it, even after the fridge mysteriously opened one night. Things were okay for a while, and we even got back together. But then, A few months ago, the activity ramped up. Pictures started falling off the walls. Some glass frames even broke. Books would shift on the shelves, and stuff would fall off our desk without explanation. Lately, it's calmed down a bit, which is a relief. But honestly, it's been stressful. We've been trying to ignore it, pretending it's nothing. But our kids think it's all a game, and now they're more aware, pointing out every little noise or movement. It makes it hard for us to stay serious, especially when they laugh and say things like, "Oh, it's just our ghost friend." Just last night during family movie night, as we watched the new Croods movie, Xbox controllers and water bottles started flying off tables. It was unsettling to hear the kids joking about it while all this was happening. I talked to my sister Alina about it. She's from our indigenous community and suggested she come over to smudge the place properly, since I never learned how to use white sage the right way. I didn't want her to disrupt her life, but I think she senses how stressed I am. It's been going on for 4 years now, and honestly, I feel at a loss. We're hoping to move eventually, but living here is expensive. So for now, we're just trying to handle it day by day, hoping for some peace. Hey there, I want to share a couple of stories with you. These are moments from my past that still give me chills, but also make me think about the mysterious side of life. So let's start with the first one. When I was a kid, we had this old family home, and one night, my mom was changing the window blinds. I had to sleep without them for a night, which wasn't too bad, but I always struggled to fall asleep easily. So there I was, about an hour and a half into trying to drift off, the moonlight spilling into my room, when suddenly, I got this eerie feeling, like someone was watching me. You know that gut feeling when you turn around and make eye contact with someone unexpected? Well, when I opened my eyes, I saw this huge black shadow hanging upside down near the top corner of my window, just staring right at me. It was so deep in darkness that I could see the stars beyond it, but no light reflected from it. Panic hit me. I wanted to scream or run, but I was frozen. Only my eyes could move. After a few seconds, it left, but I stayed paralyzed until I ran out of energy and finally fell asleep. I kept that to myself for years, until about 6 weeks ago, when my sister came to me over coffee and told me she had seen a similar shadow in her room, right by her bed. Our stories were almost the same. It's wild, right? Now, the second story is about our ancient house. We moved there when I was younger, and from day one, weird things started happening. We had this mountain dog who loved the cold. Where we lived before, she'd spend winters outside in the snow and summers on the cool basement tiles. But in this house, on the very first night, I noticed something strange. My dog, usually sleeping beside me, suddenly lifted her head and stared down the dark hallway for nearly 10 seconds, then started crying and panicking. I turned on the light. Nothing was there. 10 minutes later, the same thing happened, but this time she growled and ran off to my parents' room, refusing to enter the basement anymore. Even during hot days, she'd only go downstairs if I coaxed her with food, but she'd always look nervous and dart back upstairs. Then there was this one night, playing on my computer, when my mouse suddenly flew off the desk and hit my face at an impossible angle. And during a party in the basement, while we were all trying to sleep, 7 people claimed they saw our friend burst into a room, flip on the light, say something, and slam the door. Except that friend was outside the whole time. None of that adds up. Sometimes, late at night, I'd hear footsteps coming down the hall, stopping right outside my door. The only real attack was the mouse flying at me, but all these moments together make you wonder, don't they? So, what do you think? I've always felt like there's something beyond explanation in these experiences. Maybe shadows that watch us, or echoes of the unseen in old houses. Either way, they've stayed with me, reminding me that some mysteries are just part of life. Hey there, I want to share something that's been with me for years now, ever since my little girl was just a tiny baby. You see, I'm generally a pretty skeptical guy. I tend to think our minds play tricks on us, especially when we hear spooky stories and then start seeing things that might not really be there. But, well, I also believe there might be more than meets the eye sometimes. So, it was a quiet Sunday evening. After putting our daughter down to sleep, my partner and I decided to unwind a bit by playing Minecraft together. We always play in peaceful mode. No zombies or creepy mobs, just a calm game to relax. Anyway, as we were playing, our daughter woke up hungry. My partner went to get her some food, and that's when I felt it. This strange, heavy feeling like something else was in the room with us. It was so intense it made me pause the game. Now, my partner isn't a fan of anything spooky, not even the zombie sounds in Minecraft, so she keeps things peaceful. I wanted to brush it off as just my imagination, but when she came back, she asked if I had noticed anything weird. I told her about the creepy feeling, and she said that while she was feeding our daughter, she saw shadows moving near the doorway. That was enough for us to stop playing, bring our daughter into our bedroom, and just call it a night. My partner works as a CNA in nursing homes, and she's had her own share of eerie experiences, so she's careful about what we watch or listen to at home. Honestly, that night stuck with me. Even though I want to be rational, sometimes you just can't explain the feelings you get. So, this happened when my girlfriend and I were camping out in my car, deep in this forest area. I'd heard there was some kind of old war burial ground within maybe a kilometer of where we parked, but honestly, I don't know how true that is. It could have been just a rumor. Still, after what happened that night, it's hard not to think about it. We'd been arguing earlier, the way we sometimes did back then. But this fight was different. It started over something completely stupid, something that should have been over in 5 minutes, but it just kept building and building until it got ugly. Really ugly. At one point, it turned physical, and I ended up bleeding. I didn't hit her back, but the whole thing was awful. Then she said she hoped I died in the car, and I said I wish she died too. I hate even repeating that now. It feels heavy. Like we put something poisonous into the air and the forest heard it. During the fight, she threw this necklace I had given her somewhere outside into the dark grass and dirt. After a while, we both calmed down. We apologized, forgave each other, and started looking for it. We searched everywhere. I mean everywhere. We even tried throwing her little cross necklace in the same direction, hoping we could use the angle to figure out where mine might have landed. Nothing. We searched for hours. Then we thought maybe when it got dark, our phone flashlights would help catch the shine of the metal. So we waited. Night came, we searched again, and still nothing. Eventually we gave up and decided we'd sleep in the car, watch something, and look again in the morning. I remember very clearly putting her cross necklace in my pocket. She remembers it too. We climbed into the back of the car, trying to settle down. We were watching movies, trying to pretend the whole night hadn't been so awful. Then little things started disappearing. Food that had been right there. Bottles of water. Stuff we knew we had just seen inside the car. At first, we brushed it off. We told ourselves we were tired, stressed, maybe just not paying attention. But then this chill came over both of us at the same time, and we started thinking about the cross necklace we had thrown. I reached into my pocket to take it out. It wasn't there. That's when the fear really hit. We jumped into the front seats and decided to leave immediately. But the dirt road, the same road we had driven in on, suddenly felt endless. It was like it had stretched itself out. Even Waze started glitching, freezing and rerouting for no reason. I started praying under my breath, and after that, the app came back. We finally made it to the main highway around 1 in the morning. I was still scared, so I wasn't driving fast. I just wanted to get us back safely. But then animals started appearing along the road. Deer, cats, shapes in the grass. They weren't running across the road like animals usually do. They were just standing there by the side, staring at us. We drove slowly, both of us completely silent. Then we passed this area with tall grass on both sides and nowhere a person should have been walking. I saw something brown near the edge of the road, but I told myself it was probably a piece of wood or a stump or something. Then my girlfriend suddenly screamed, "Drive! Go faster!" So I sped up. My whole body went cold. I kept asking her, "What did you see? What was it?" She just kept saying, "Nothing, just drive." Later, she told me what she saw. She said it looked like an old woman standing there in the grass, wearing a dark leather coat and a purple scarf. She was staring straight at us, and her eyes were glowing. We drove back toward town, where there were streetlights and other signs of life. And somehow, once we were out of the forest, most of the things that had disappeared inside the car started showing up again. But they were in places where we absolutely would have seen them before. Places we never put them. Places that didn't make sense. We were terrified. When morning finally came, we slept for a while. After we woke up, we drove back to the same spot in the forest to search for the necklace I had given her. We looked for about half an hour and still couldn't find it. Then I decided to clean up the trash we had left behind. I didn't want to leave the forest like that, especially after everything that had happened. And as soon as I started picking things up, the necklace appeared on the ground right beside the car. Right there, in a spot we had walked past and searched around 100 times. There's no way we would have missed it before. After that, we both came to the same thought. Maybe because we had wished death on each other in the car, something there took it seriously. Maybe whatever was in that place wanted to scare me into speeding, make an animal jump out, make me panic, crash, and actually die the way we had spoken it. I still don't know what attacked us that night. But I do know this. It felt like our anger opened a door, and something in that forest was listening. I've never really been the kind of person who gets into ghost stories. Honestly, I avoid horror movies altogether because even a cheap jump scare is enough to ruin my night. But lately, the things happening in my house have started to make me wonder if there's something here I can't explain. For more than a decade now, weird little things have been happening with the electronics around my house. Lights flicking on or off, devices acting up for no clear reason, stuff like that. For years, I brushed it off. I figured maybe it was some kind of interference, like a neighbor's remote, or just old wiring doing strange things. It felt easy enough to explain away. Then one night, my girlfriend Maya was over. She was sitting beside me in a chair, working on an assignment, and I was at my desk on my computer. Out of nowhere, a can of iced tea that was still pretty full just slid across the desk by itself. Not tipped over, not rolled, just slid. We both turned and saw it at the exact same moment. After that, I spent several minutes trying to recreate it, pushing the can from different spots, checking the surface, everything. The desk was flat, and there was no way it should have moved like that without spilling. It didn't make sense, but at the time, I still told myself it was just one of those weird things. Then there are my dogs. I have 2 of them, and every so often at night they'll suddenly start barking like something has really set them off. At first, I assumed it was just noise outside. There are always people around the neighborhood, kids running around late, that kind of thing. But one night, it went on long enough that I decided to quietly go check on them without calling attention to myself. I came upstairs expecting to find them at the window or by the front door, but instead, both of them were standing frozen at the entrance to the kitchen. The whole kitchen was completely dark, and it was around midnight. They were staring straight into it, growling and barking like they were focused on something very specific. They didn't even notice me walk up behind them, which is unusual by itself. When I turned the kitchen light on, both of them looked up at me almost like they were confused, like whatever had their attention was suddenly gone. What really got to me was the growling. My dogs are not aggressive. I had never heard that sound from them before. One of them had the fur raised along the back of her neck. I didn't see anything in that room, and I didn't hear anything either, but they were reacting to something. The part that's really been getting under my skin, though, is something I started seeing more recently. Every now and then, I'll catch sight of this strange, greenish shape, kind of like a misty glow, about the size of a small ball. It's transparent, almost smoky. And the weirdest part is that it never seems to come toward me. It always seems to move away. What I mean is, if I'm heading downstairs, I'll catch a glimpse of it going up the other staircase. If I'm going upstairs, I'll see it drifting down the opposite side. It feels less like it's following me, and more like it's deliberately avoiding me. That somehow makes it even stranger. At this point, I've started leaving lights on around the house all the time. I even bought lower wattage bulbs so I wouldn't feel as bad doing it. When I'm home alone now, I catch myself not wanting to turn around too quickly, like I'm nervous about what I might see behind me. And then there are the smells. That's another thing I can't explain. Every so often, I'll suddenly notice a scent in the house that absolutely should not be there. Sometimes it smells like tobacco or cigars, even though no one here smokes. Other times it's something unfamiliar that I can't even identify. And my bedroom, for some reason, will randomly smell intensely like oranges. Not faintly either. I mean overwhelmingly, like someone tore open a huge pile of fresh orange peels and left them all over the room. I don't use citrus candles, sprays, cleaners, nothing. There's no reason for that smell to be there, but when it happens, it's strong. So that's where I'm at now. I've spent a long time trying to explain all of this away as coincidences, bad timing, weird house stuff, anything practical. But when you pile all of it together, it starts to feel like something is off. I still don't know what to call it. I don't know if that green mist is supposed to be some kind of spirit, or if there's another explanation entirely. I just know that whatever's happening in this house doesn't feel random anymore. So, I work at a Goodwill in southern Massachusetts, and this happened around 8:30 at night, in the middle of winter. It was one of those cold, dry evenings where everything outside feels still. No rain, no snow, nothing dramatic, just quiet. We were getting close to closing when my assistant manager, Mara, happened to glance at the security cameras and noticed this dark figure moving around near the little hallway by the bathrooms. She asked me to check the monitor with her because she thought she saw something shift. At first, I honestly didn't catch anything. Then suddenly, I saw it. It came out of the customer bathroom and darted across the hall, like it was trying to stay out of sight, and slipped behind this folded table we had leaning against the wall. At that point, we asked the store manager to come take a look, because we wanted to make absolutely sure there wasn't somehow still a customer in the building. He went out with Mara to check the bathroom, and I stayed in the office watching the cameras. He knocked on the bathroom door, opened it, and stepped inside to look around. While he was doing that, I saw the figure again on the monitor, and for a second, I thought it was Mara. But then I noticed she was still standing a few feet away near the back room door. That was the moment my stomach just dropped. After they checked the bathroom, I watched my manager suddenly run toward the back wall of the building, into the linen section, peering between and underneath the racks like he had seen someone duck in there. From where I was watching, though, I couldn't make sense of it. I didn't see anyone at all. I figured maybe he was just being thorough and checking every possible hiding spot. Then both of them moved to the front of the store, turned on more lights, and checked behind the registers and all the other places someone could crouch down and hide. My manager went back again to look through the linen racks, and then he stopped near the front door. A little later, the lights were turned back off, and they both came back to the office to ask if I'd seen anyone on the cameras. I didn't tell them right away about the figure because I wasn't sure whether my store manager believed in anything paranormal, and I didn't want to sound ridiculous. But then he told me he thought he'd seen someone hiding in the linen racks, and right after that, he heard knocking on the back glass door. He wanted to show both of us exactly where he'd seen it and which door the sound came from. So he started testing the doors, checking whether maybe one had shifted open or whether wind could have caused the noise. Then he knocked on the glass himself after moving the door around a little, and sure enough, that was the exact same sound. Even after figuring that part out, none of us felt better. We were all already too shaken. So we decided the closing tasks were done, we were finished for the night, and we were leaving. Nobody wanted to stay in that building any longer than necessary. I ended up being the last one left to clock out, and of course, that's when the digital punch-in system started glitching and wouldn't accept my clock out. Standing there alone while that thing kept messing up was just about enough to send me over the edge. Later, I found out my store manager actually does believe in the paranormal and has had a lot of experiences before. He's the kind of person who usually doesn't scare easily at all, so seeing him genuinely rattled made everything feel even worse. Mara has had experiences too, and we've talked before about some strange things we've both had happen. What really gets to me is that most days I'm opening or closing the store with just one other person, and that person is usually in the back room sorting donations. So I'm the one walking through the dark store, turning on lights, starting the music, and cleaning up whatever got left behind the night before. After what happened, I was seriously debating whether I could even make myself go in for my opening shift the next morning. And because of store rules, I can't do anything like burn sage or incense or put salt by the doors, even if I wanted to. So I've just been sitting with this feeling, wondering how to make myself and the rest of the staff feel safe at work again. Whatever that was, it terrified me. And more than anything, I just wanted it to stop bothering us and go back to whatever normal had been before. So, bear with me. I'm not the best storyteller in the world, but this is something that happened to me years ago, and it still unsettles me when I think about it. I was 18 at the time, living with my grandparents. They were deeply religious, and I was getting ready to be baptized, so faith was a huge part of my life back then. The dream started with me sitting on an old porch swing beside this big cardboard box. My father had told me to give it to a man when he arrived. After a while, this man walked up wearing a long dark coat and a black hat. He asked for the box, and as I handed it over, the bottom gave out and everything spilled across the porch. It was hundreds of photographs. I dropped down, scrambling to gather them, and that's when I realized they weren't just random pictures. They were moments from my childhood. Some looked like actual photos I'd seen before, and others felt more like captured memories, little pieces of my life laid out in front of me. Then I looked up at my dad, and he was crying. He just said, "I'm sorry." And somehow I understood. He was giving away my memories, handing over pieces of my childhood to this stranger. While I was picking them up, I slipped one photo into my pocket, hoping he wouldn't notice. Once everything had been gathered and handed back, the man started walking away. But when he reached the end of the path, he stopped and turned around like he knew. Like he knew I had kept one. The next second, he was on me. He moved so fast it didn't feel human. And then I was in my bed. I was awake, or at least I thought I was. But my eyes were squeezed shut and I couldn't move. I felt this horrible presence hovering right above me, so close it was like the air itself had turned heavy. I wanted to open my eyes, but I was completely frozen. And more than that, I was terrified that if I looked, I'd see something I could never unsee. It felt like pure darkness was hanging over me, like if I met its gaze, something in me would be lost forever. That sounds dramatic, I know, but in that moment, that was the fear. It was absolute. My chest felt tight, my whole body felt trapped, and there was this awful tension between wanting to know what was there and being too afraid to find out. Then, through all of that, I heard my grandmother's voice from the other side of my bedroom door. She was encouraging me, almost like she knew I was fighting through something. She kept saying, "You're okay, keep going. You're doing so well. I'm proud of you." After what felt like forever, the presence disappeared. I could move again. I opened my eyes, sat straight up, and realized I was drenched in fear, heart racing, struggling to catch my breath. I ran out of my room and found my grandparents sitting at the dining table, both of them still awake, which was unusual that late at night. It was probably around 11. I looked at my grandmother and asked, "Were you just standing outside my door?" She looked confused and said, "No." So I told them everything. The dream, the presence, her voice, all of it. When I finished, neither of them really had much to say. My grandmother just pulled me into a long hug and told me to try to get some rest. That was almost 10 years ago, and honestly, it still stays with me. Even now, there are moments when I wake up in the dark and feel that old fear creeping back in. That fear of opening my eyes and seeing something terrible staring down at me. I need to tell you about a house that has stayed with me my whole life. It belonged to my great-grandmother, and it sat near an old burial ground. Everyone in my family had stories about that place. My mom, my uncles, my aunts, they all talked about things that never quite made sense. Lights would blink for no reason. Shadows would slip past doorways. Marks would show up on the bed sheets like someone had pressed a hand there. Little objects would turn up in different spots. Nothing dramatic enough to prove anything, but always just unsettling enough to leave you uneasy. I was about 13 when something finally happened to me. Back then, my cousin Lila and I were inseparable. She was only a few years older than me, so summers at that house felt like our own little world. We spent whole days outside, riding bikes, swimming until our hair smelled like chlorine, making up games, setting out silly afternoon tea spreads, staying busy from morning to night. We barely ever bothered with television. But one night, after our grandparents had gone to bed, we decided to do something different and turn the TV on. The living room was small and comfortable. There was a couch against the wall, a fireplace across from it, and a mirror hanging above the mantel. The TV sat off to the side. From where you stood, you could see straight into the kitchen and part of the dining room through the open layout. At one point, I got up to grab a few snacks. As I walked through the narrow space between the hallway and the dining room, I glanced at the mirror over the fireplace. And in the reflection, I saw her. There was a girl standing in the kitchen doorway. She had long, dark hair hanging over her face, and she was wearing a white gown that looked old-fashioned, almost like a nightdress. She wasn't moving at all. She just stood there, completely still. I cannot explain the feeling that hit me when I saw her. It was like all the warmth left my body at once. I just stared, locked in place, too scared to even breathe properly. Then I finally snapped out of it, ran back to the couch, and told Lila exactly what I'd seen. What scared me even more was that she didn't laugh it off. She looked shaken, but not shocked. She told me she'd had strange experiences in that house too. She'd seen odd impressions on the bed at night, strange marks that looked like handprints, things she could never explain. So that night, neither of us slept very well. The next morning, we woke up and realized the house was empty. That had never happened before. Our grandparents had never left us there alone. We found a note on the kitchen counter saying they had gone into town for a quick errand and would be back soon. So we did what kids do when they're trying to distract themselves. We turned the TV on again. The problem was, neither of us really knew how to use the remote properly. After pressing a bunch of buttons and arguing over which one did what, I finally got a cartoon channel to come on, and we sat down to watch. Only a few minutes later, the screen suddenly cut to static. At first, I thought I'd pressed something by accident. I started messing with the remote, trying button after button, but nothing fixed it. The stranger part was that the only button that seemed to respond was volume up. Every time I pressed it, the static got louder, sharper, more aggressive. I tried to turn the TV off, but it wouldn't respond. And then, through all that static, we heard a voice. It was low and rough, definitely a woman's voice, and it said, very slowly, "I know who you are." I just froze. I looked at Lila and asked, "Did you hear that?" She nodded, and I could see all the color had drained from her face. I remember whispering, almost crying, "It's the girl from last night." At that point, I completely lost it. I covered my ears and started rocking back and forth, and Lila, just as frightened as I was, rushed over and yanked the plug out of the wall. The sound stopped immediately. We sat there in silence for a long time. Neither of us knew what to say. We were just staring at each other, trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense. After a while, I convinced myself there had to be an explanation. So we plugged the TV back in. And just like that, it came on normally. The cartoon was back. The static was gone. The remote worked perfectly, including the volume down button that suddenly had no problem at all. I even checked the channel guide, trying to find some clue, some strange program, some horror preview, anything that might explain that voice. But there was nothing. The timing didn't line up with any show or commercial. Nothing fit. That's the part that has stayed with me all these years. I still don't know who that voice belonged to. I don't know why it said it knew me. I don't know whether it was trying to warn me, scare me, or pull me towards something I'm glad I never understood. But I can tell you this with complete honesty. After that summer, I stopped calling myself a skeptic. So I've always believed in ghosts and the paranormal, and my friend Ryan does too. It's kind of become our thing. We talk about this stuff all the time, and every now and then we try to help people when something strange starts happening around them. This all really began when another friend of mine, I'll call him Jeremy, told me he'd been seeing this tall, pale, faceless man following him around. At first, I honestly thought he was joking, because it sounded a little too close to some creepy internet story. But then he mentioned the long, thin fingers, and that caught me off guard, because I'd actually heard descriptions like that before from other people. So I started asking Jeremy questions, trying to figure out exactly what he was seeing, and I could not pin it down. Whatever it was, it seemed to be following him all the way home. I texted Ryan, who lives about an hour away from me, and that detail mattered because he was nowhere near us. But he started helping right away. He was researching while I was telling Jeremy not to look directly at it and to act like it wasn't there. Then Ryan texted me and said, "My lamp just got knocked over when I tried to look this thing up." That was enough for one night. We both stopped and went to bed. The next day I checked in with Jeremy, and he said he hadn't seen or heard anything since. Later on, I was lying in bed, and out of nowhere this image flashed into my mind so clearly it made my stomach drop. I saw a faceless man crouched outside my room, peeking under my door, with those long, spidery fingers reaching underneath. What's strange is, that figure turned out not to be the main problem. Later, we came to believe he was actually trying to warn us. But at the time, I had no way of knowing that. That was just the beginning. Nothing much happened for a while after that. A couple of months passed. Then Ryan came over because we were going to a convention together that weekend. And at some point that night, we decided to do tarot readings for each other, mostly out of curiosity. The readings were actually surprisingly helpful. After that, I turned on a spirit box. I'm usually skeptical about spirit boxes, or at least I try to be. But that night, I couldn't explain away what was happening. It said my name multiple times. It said Ryan's name too. And then I felt this overwhelming presence behind me. So strong it made me freeze. In my mind, I saw that same tall white figure again. At the time, I thought it was threatening us. Later, I started to believe it had been trying to warn us. Back then, though, we thought something else was at the center of it. We started referring to it as the snake. A few weeks later, Ryan and I were on video call. While we were talking, I suddenly felt drawn to my bedroom door. I set my camera near it so Ryan could see the crack under the door, but not the things I was placing on the floor. Ryan started describing in eerie detail exactly what I was seeing in my head. That was when I decided to try communicating. I wrote yes and no on a piece of paper and placed it near the door. I said that if something was there, it could tap one side for yes and the other for no. We did that for a while. Then Ryan said it seemed to be pointing toward my tarot deck. So I pulled out 3 cards that represented me, Ryan, and another friend, who I'll call Jonah. I laid them in front of the door. Ryan couldn't see the cards themselves, only the space near the door. And somehow, every single time, it indicated Ryan's card. I shuffled the order and repeated it several times, and it still chose the same one. That unsettled me. Then I asked if Jonah was important somehow, and the answer came back yes, even though Jonah barely knew anything about what had been happening. Later, I remembered how often the Page of Cups had been showing up in readings. I placed that card down and asked if it represented whatever was there. The answer was yes. So I repeated the same test, mixing that card in face down with the others, and again, it picked the correct one. At that point, we thought maybe this presence was strange, but safe. A few nights after that, Ryan and I were trying again to get answers. At one point, Ryan said, "It's like his hand is being forced not to answer." That stuck with me. So instead of asking out loud, I started asking certain questions silently in my mind, directing them toward whatever was outside the door. When I did that, I got clearer responses. Once, I asked out loud whether it wanted me to open the door, and the answer was yes. But when I asked the same question silently in my head, I got no. So I didn't open it. That was the moment I started feeling that there was more than one presence out there. One of them felt controlled, almost restrained. The other felt heavier, darker, and wrong in a way that's hard to explain unless you felt it. Then came the worst mistake I made. I lowered part of the spiritual protection I keep around myself, just enough that communication would be easier. The second I did that, Ryan saw a black hand creeping under my door. That changed everything. Up until then, there were details I hadn't fully said out loud, maybe because I didn't want them to become more real. But by then, I couldn't ignore the pattern anymore. We had reason to believe that this darker presence was the same thing Ryan believed had tried to attack him when he was a child. And for me, it connected to something I'd seen years ago with my cousin when I was maybe 7. A tall black figure with red eyes. So when Ryan described black fingers reaching under my door, it hit something deep in me. We tried asking it questions, but it didn't really want to answer. It just kept trying to touch me. It couldn't because I put my protection back up, but it kept trying. At one point, I held my hands near the door and asked both the snake and the darker thing to touch me. The difference was immediate. The snake's touch felt steady, almost gentle, like a hand laid flat against mine. The other one hovered. It felt invasive, calculating. Later, through tarot and the little bits of communication we could get, it basically exposed itself as manipulative and controlling, which honestly confirmed what we already suspected. By then, we believed it had been controlling the snake for a long time. And that's where things stand right now. I've been sick these past few days, so I haven't pushed further. Ryan even tried posting about this once before, but when the post went up, the whole body text was gone. He showed me a screenshot proving he'd written it all out, but when I opened the link, there was nothing there except the title. He said he felt this deep sense of dread while writing it. That's the same feeling I get when I talk about this too long. So that's my story. I know how unbelievable it sounds. I know some of it sounds impossible when you say it out loud. But this is exactly how it happened, and I'm sharing it because I want someone to understand that I'm not telling it for attention. I'm telling it because something is wrong, and I want to figure out what this thing is, how to get rid of it, and how to free that other presence from whatever hold it's under. So this all started when I found 2 framed paintings at a neighborhood sale, and I was instantly pulled toward them. The frames were stunning, the artwork was beautiful, and even though I could tell they were more modern than antique, I didn't care. They looked exactly like something my mom, Marissa, would love, and they would have fit her style so perfectly that I felt like I had to bring them home. The best part was that I got both of them for $15, which felt like such a win. The woman selling them was really kind, and while we were talking, she told me she had originally bought them for her own mother. Not long after she hung them up in her mom's house, her mother passed away. At the time, I just felt sorry for her and told her how sorry I was for her loss. I didn't think much more about it after that. When I got home, I measured the paintings and realized they were way too large for my place, so I left them in the trunk of my SUV, figuring I'd deal with them later. But even then, I noticed something strange. I got attached to them almost immediately. I didn't want to donate them, didn't want to sell them, didn't even really want to talk about giving them away. It felt oddly personal, even though they were just 2 pictures I'd picked up on a random afternoon. I bought them around September of 2024, and by early April 2025, they were still sitting in my car. And ever since they've been there, things have happened that I still can't really explain. The first time was sometime in October. I was driving to work, talking on the phone with my partner, and he suggested we could just drop the paintings off at a thrift store so someone else could enjoy them. I didn't get furious or anything, but I felt this sudden irritation rise up in me, way stronger than it should have been. I told him the paintings were staying with me until I found the right place for them. The second he kept pushing the idea, the call cut out. Every electronic system in my car shut down, and this awful buzzing sound blasted through the speakers. It scared me so badly I nearly swerved off the road. I had to pull over, shut the whole car off, and restart it to make it stop. What made it even stranger was that the vehicle was practically brand new. I'd only had it a short time. Then later that month, after work one night, I got into my car and was getting ready to back out when I glanced in the rearview mirror. I swear I saw the top of someone's head behind the back seats. It was just enough to make out curly, dark gray hair and part of a forehead before it ducked down. I jumped out immediately and checked everywhere, the trunk, the back rows, all of it. No one was there. I even looked around the parking lot to see if someone had walked past the car, but the only people nearby didn't look anything like what I'd seen. And where I work, on that shift especially, it would have been unusual to see an older woman around at all. The third thing happened in November during a break at work. I was in my car trying to nap, or at least rest with my eyes closed. While I was lying there, I heard movement in the back and this soft tapping sound, like fingernails or glass being lightly touched. At first, I thought maybe someone was tapping on the window to get my attention, but when I looked, no one was there. I tried to ignore it and settle back down, but the sounds kept going. Then I felt something tug my hair. I got out of there so fast and went right back inside to work. That alone should tell you how shaken I was, because I never cut my break short unless something is really wrong. And honestly, those are only a few of the things that have happened. There have been more, but even saying these out loud makes me feel ridiculous and unsettled at the same time. Now I'm stuck in this place where I don't know what to do. Every time the subject of getting rid of the paintings comes up, something weird seems to happen. So lately, I've just been telling people they're staying with me, that they can stay in my car as long as they need to. But that's not really possible anymore. I'm pregnant, and before long, I'm going to need that trunk space for a stroller and baby stuff. And the thought of something going wrong while I'm driving, especially while pregnant or later with my son in the car, scares me more than I can explain. I think what I really need is for someone to tell me I'm overthinking this. That maybe I absorbed that woman's story more deeply than I realized, and now my mind is connecting every strange thing to those paintings. That maybe there isn't anything attached to them at all, and I can let them go without something terrible happening. Because I want to believe that. I really do. I just haven't been able to shake this feeling long enough to do anything about it. My name's Mara, and I still get chills when I think about this house. We moved in about 6 years ago, and not long after that, little things started happening that I just could not explain. One of the first times was down in the basement. I'd gone down there in the afternoon to grab a small tackle box because I needed a few fishing hooks. Our basement is only partly underground, so during the day it gets enough natural light that I usually do not bother turning the overhead light on. I found what I needed, set the hooks on a table, and as I was putting the box back, I accidentally clipped the edge of the little container. It hit the floor and hooks scattered everywhere. I bent down to pick them up, and right then, the basement light switched on. At first, I honestly was not scared. My husband was due home around that time, so I figured he must have come in, seen me on the floor gathering hooks, and flipped the switch to help me out. I even said, "Thanks," but there was no answer. I called for him again. Still nothing. So I went upstairs to check. He was not home. The dog was the only other living thing in that house with me. What unsettled me most was that the light had not flicked on by itself before that day, and it has not done it since. The switch was physically flipped up. Something had moved it. The doors were locked. The house was quiet, and I still do not know what turned that light on for me. After that, more things started happening. Another time I was cleaning upstairs with one of those canister vacuums, the kind with a main power button and a separate switch on the head for the rollers. I had just finished the stairs and shut it off, but left it plugged in because I was about to do the living room next. I walked down the hall to change the laundry, and suddenly, the vacuum roared to life behind me. Even my dog reacted. We both turned at the same time and stared down the hall. There was nobody near it. Nothing touched it. But it was running. Then there was the day I thought I saw my husband in the basement. We had just come home with groceries. He was carrying things in, and I went downstairs to scoop food for the dog from the storage bin under the stairs. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw what looked exactly like him coming down the steps. He paused just behind me for a second, then moved toward the back part of the basement where we keep extra drinks and canned stuff. So I asked, "Do you have more to bring down?" No answer. I asked again. Still nothing. I stepped around the corner, expecting to see him there, but the space was empty. Completely empty. I went back upstairs with the dog food and found my husband at the far end of the house. He told me he had not even been downstairs yet. That one really got to me. And the reason it got to me even more is because my husband used to brush all of this off. He did not believe in ghosts, spirits, any of it. Every time I told him something strange had happened, he would look at me like I was imagining things. Then, one evening, he had his own experience. I was driving home from work, talking to him on the phone. He was in the middle of a sentence when he suddenly stopped, just dead silent. My heart dropped because I thought something had happened. Then he said, very quietly, "Hang on, someone's here." That already felt wrong, because the dog had not barked. A moment later he came back and said, "I need to call you right back. I just saw somebody outside the door and I do not know where they went." We live way out in the country. The nearest neighbors are far enough away that you would notice a car, a person, anything. He went outside, checked around the house, looked near the garage and the sheds, and found nobody. Nothing. He told me he was sure he had seen someone in a flannel shirt walk past the door, but whoever it was had simply vanished. And still, the dog never reacted. Even now, every once in a while, I catch the smell of cigarette smoke in one corner of the basement. Just that one spot. Nowhere else in the house. We do not smoke, so it stands out immediately. There is never any visible smoke, just that smell drifting in for no reason. There have been other odd moments too. Strange little things I have tried to explain away because I wanted there to be a normal reason. For a while, I even wondered if I was just overtired or letting my imagination get the better of me. But once my husband saw something too, I stopped feeling like I had to defend myself. The house itself is not especially old. It was built in the 1970s, and as far as we know, no one died here. But there was an older farmhouse on the property before this one was built, and that place was torn down years ago. I have sometimes wondered whether whatever is here did not leave when that house did. One more thing that matters. I am deaf in one ear. So yes, there are times when my husband can come into the house and I genuinely will not hear him, depending on where I am and which side he is on. That is part of why we got the dog in the first place. He always alerts us when someone comes down the driveway, and when I am home alone, I keep every door locked. So when things happen in that house, I do not jump to conclusions lightly. But after everything I have seen, everything I have heard, and everything my husband has seen too, I cannot shake the feeling that we are sharing that house with something we cannot explain. I was 19 when this started. It was my first year in college, and I stayed behind in the dorms over fall break because home was not a place I felt safe going back to. Almost everyone else had cleared out, so the building felt hollow, like it was holding its breath. The first strange thing happened that very first weekend. I stepped out to do laundry late at night, and as I passed the window at the end of the hall, I caught the reflection of a girl with dark hair standing behind me. Just for a second. When I turned, no one was there. It vanished so fast I almost convinced myself I imagined it, but it left this cold feeling in me that I couldn't shake. After that, nights got harder. I'd wake up in the dark and hear this deep, heavy breathing under my bed. Not like a person, more like some large animal. Slow, deliberate, too close. I was trying to live like a normal college kid, you know? Going out, meeting people, pretending everything was fine. But whatever was happening kept pushing its way into my life. It felt like something dark had attached itself to me. I didn't grow up thinking this kind of thing was real, so part of me kept trying to explain it away. But another part of me knew I was experiencing something I couldn't explain. I felt split in half. One version of me wanted to fit in and keep moving. The other one knew something was terribly wrong. As the weeks passed, it escalated. My bed would shake hard enough to wake me. Once, I was sitting in the bathroom and the toilet started vibrating underneath me. Another time I was studying alone, and the book in my hand snapped shut on its own. By then, I wasn't even shocked anymore. I was irritated. It had become constant enough to interfere with everyday life. One afternoon, I was alone in my room, lying on my bed, when I felt the sheets lift and tug away from me. A friend of mine, a deeply religious guy, had already given me advice because I'd finally told him some of what had been happening. He told me to turn on the lights, speak directly to whatever it was, and tell it plainly that it had no authority over me. So I climbed off the bed, stood up on my desk chair because for some reason I felt safer off the floor, and I said out loud, "In the name of Christ, leave me alone." The second I said it, my desk lamp started flickering wildly until it went dead. Just dead. I tried to switch it back on, and nothing happened. I ran out of that room so fast. A few nights later, I had one of the most vivid dreams of my life. In the dream, I was lying in bed when the mattress opened beneath me, like a black pit had formed in the center of it, and I started falling. There was something inside that darkness laughing at me, mocking me. And then, somehow, I spoke back to it in words I didn't consciously know. I still can't explain that. I don't remember exactly what I said, only that it meant something like, "You cannot have her." Then I rose above that opening, and my chest filled with this overwhelming love, so strong it felt almost unbearable. I woke up before it peaked, but I never forgot that feeling. Eventually, I told another friend everything. He took me to a Catholic church to speak with a priest. While we were there, sitting in that quiet office, both of us felt this awful heaviness in the room, like something was standing just outside our sight, listening. The priest gave advice, though honestly, I barely remember it now, and it didn't seem to change much. Later, back at the dorm, my friend and I were talking when I suddenly felt that same dark force move into me. I know how unbelievable that sounds, but I felt it, unmistakably. I didn't say anything out loud. In my mind, I told it to leave. I said it with everything I had. And the moment it lifted from me, I watched my friend's face drain completely white. He looked terrified and said, "I think something's trying to get into me." After that, the activity around me weakened. It didn't disappear right away, but it lost some of its grip. At the same time, my friend started saying he was having experiences of his own. My dreams changed too. I kept seeing him in them, but not as himself. The dreams would begin normally, and then something would shift. The people around me would peel off their faces, almost like masks, and reveal something monstrous underneath. They would laugh and chant, "You're only human," over and over, like it was an accusation. Not long after that, the friendship fell apart. He started acting in ways that deeply unsettled me, and we drifted out of each other's lives. Months later, while visiting another friend in a different town, I met with another priest. This time they prepared for me ahead of time and gave me specially blessed holy water, along with instructions for how to use it, and a prayer to say while blessing my room. I followed those instructions carefully. I went back, prayed through the room, and for the first time since all of this began, I felt like the air changed. After that, I was left alone. Almost completely. There was only one last incident. About a year later, I was in a new dorm room and hadn't thought about any of it in a long time. Then one night, I woke up suddenly to music playing from my phone. It was a Johnny Cash song, "I Walk the Line." The strange part was, I didn't even have that song on my phone. It only played a few lines, and then it stopped. Right after that, there was a knock at the door. Now, in a dorm, a knock at the door shouldn't mean much, but this one was different. It was too loud, too heavy, and somehow too high up on the door, like it came from a place that didn't make physical sense. I froze. I didn't answer it, and that was it. I've never had another experience like those years. More than a decade has passed. I'm in my 30s now, and I still remember the feeling that whatever was with me believed it would come back someday. But here's the truth. I'm not living in fear of it. I've had enough distance now to see that whatever was happening, it did not get to keep me. And if anything ever does try to come back, I know myself better now. I know my own strength better now. That changes everything. I'm not even totally sure how to explain this, but it all really started when I moved into this house in the South a few years ago. Right before the move, I had a serious health scare and spent some time recovering, so I was already feeling worn down and a little off. But after I got settled in, things started happening that I just couldn't shake. At first, it was the dreams. They were strange, vivid, and heavy in a way that's hard to describe. I'd wake up in the middle of the night feeling like someone was in the room with me, like I was being watched. Nothing obvious at first, just that feeling. You know when your body wakes up before your mind catches up and everything feels wrong? It was like that almost every night. Then I started noticing my bedroom door. I'd fall asleep with it barely cracked open, and then I'd wake up and it would be standing wide open. I had a young dog at the time, still just a puppy, so I kept telling myself it had to be him nudging it or moving around. I wanted a normal explanation. But then I started seeing something near the doorway. At first it was just a shadow, the kind of thing you catch out of the corner of your eye and immediately try to explain away. But it kept happening. Night after night, I'd wake up and see this dark figure shift or move just as I looked toward the door. My dog never barked, never reacted the way I thought he should, so I kept convincing myself maybe I was stuck between dreaming and waking. But it got worse. Eventually I had one of those moments where I couldn't move at all. Full sleep paralysis. And what I saw that night is still burned into my mind. There was this figure standing over me and my dog. It looked like a tall woman, just completely dark, with long, tangled hair hanging around her face and shoulders. Everything about her was black, like she wasn't even made of light or shadow, just absence. She didn't say anything. She just stood there looking at me. The next day, the whole house felt off. My brothers and sisters were uneasy too, even though none of us really wanted to say it out loud. We were all in the kitchen trying to act normal, eating and talking, when we thought we heard someone moving around in the garage. We checked, and there was nobody there, so we brushed it off and went back inside. A few minutes later, the garage door slammed from the inside. Every one of us froze. The whole mood changed instantly. Nobody wanted to keep eating after that. There were other things too. The kind of things that sound small until you're standing there watching them happen. One time the kitchen sink turned on by itself. I know how that sounds, I really do. But my sister was there with me. We both watched the handle move on its own and the hot water start running. Neither of us knew what to say. We just stood there staring. And the strangest part was that after a while, it stopped feeling like whatever this was belonged only to the house. It felt attached to me somehow. I started feeling watched even when I wasn't home. I remember once at school, I was walking down the hallway with a friend, and the lights above us started going out one by one as I passed underneath them. Not all at once, just fading in sequence like something was following me. My friend laughed nervously and made some joke about hoping there wasn't something evil around us. The second he said it, the lights came back on. Every single one. We both stopped laughing after that. At work, things would disappear when I was alone. A pen, a marker, sticky notes, little things I had just set down. I'd turn around and they'd be gone. Then the next day, I'd find them sitting exactly where they had been before they disappeared, like nothing had happened. It got to the point where I started doubting my own mind. By then, I hated being by myself. This all started back in 2019, when I had just moved in with my parents. They'd complain about the house sometimes, little noises, doors, random stuff, but they never seemed to see the things I saw. Over time, I tried to ignore it. I got used to pushing certain things out of my mind just to get through the day. But the heavier the energy in that house felt, the stronger all of it seemed to get. It honestly felt like I was being worn down on purpose. One of the more recent things happened when I was bringing home food for my mom. Everything had been fine. I got back to the house, went to open the door, and I swear it should have opened. My mom usually keeps it locked because of her job, and the lock makes a clear sound when it opens properly. I heard the click. I turned the knob. Nothing. I did it again. Another click. Still nothing. Again. Same thing. The lock sounded open, but the door would not move. By that point, I was pounding on the door so hard I felt desperate, like pure panic had taken over. And that's what this has done to me. It's drained me. It's affected my social life, my sleep, my energy, everything. Some mornings I don't even want to get out of bed. I finished school thinking life would finally start moving forward, thinking maybe I had some control again. But instead, it feels like it's just me, my dog, and this house. And my dog? He's not timid at all. He's a strong boxer, trained around tough animals, not the kind of dog that scares easily. Sometimes he'll suddenly get up and stare into empty space like something is standing right there. His whole body goes rigid. He'll growl low, circle, and fix on one spot like he wants to attack. But he hesitates, like he knows something isn't right. It got so intense that I started keeping him outside more often, because once he got older, he would not settle down when he sensed it. I'm telling you, living like that changes you. Even when nothing is happening, you're waiting for it to happen. You're bracing for the next sound, the next shadow, the next moment where something small turns into something you can't explain. And after a while, you start wondering whether it's the house, or whether whatever it is has decided to follow you. I need to tell you about something that happened when I was in high school. I'm pushing 40 now, so this goes way back, but I still remember it so clearly. At the time, I was living with my family in a condo. It was me, my mom, my dad, and my younger brother. My dad usually worked late managing a restaurant, so he was often out in the evenings. My mom worked daytime hours, so she'd usually be home at night, moving around the kitchen or tidying something up. My brother was almost always planted in front of the TV. This was in the late 90s, maybe right around the early 2000s, so we had this old computer set up in my parents' room. I loved being on it. I was probably doing the most era-appropriate thing possible, downloading songs, chatting online, wasting time. Beside the desk was this little entry space leading past the closets, and from where I sat, I could see part of it out of the corner of my eye. One night, while I was focused on the screen, I clearly saw what looked like a pair of legs walking away from me toward the bedroom door. I barely reacted at first because I assumed it was my brother. But then I turned to look, and there was no one there. The door was only partly open, and there's no way he could have slipped through that fast without me noticing. Right after that, this cold, uneasy feeling hit me in the stomach. I froze. I remember just sitting there, staring, trying to make sense of it. Eventually, I went back to what I was doing, but I kept the whole thing to myself. About a week later, I was in the living room talking to my mom. We were standing across from each other, and behind her was a wall with 3 large mirrors. While she was speaking, I saw this blurred shadow move quickly across one of the mirrors. It happened so fast, but I know I saw it. I stopped her right in the middle of her sentence and said, "Mom, please don't panic, but I just saw something in the mirror." That did not go over well. She immediately got upset and thought I was joking. I told her I was being completely serious, but that only made her more unsettled. And the thing is, nothing had been influencing me. I hadn't watched anything creepy, hadn't read anything spooky, hadn't even told anyone yet about what I'd seen in the bedroom. Then maybe another week passed, and one day my dad came home with news. He'd become friendly with the building manager, a guy named Randy, and as soon as he walked in, he said, "You won't believe this. Randy told me they found one of the tenants dead." Apparently, someone who lived alone on another floor had passed away quietly in their unit, and no one realized for at least a couple of weeks. The second I heard that, everything in me dropped. My dad had no idea about the things I'd seen, but I knew, deep down, that whatever I had witnessed was connected. I never felt like it was something evil. More than anything, it felt sad. Like someone was disoriented, lingering, trying to be noticed. I never found out who that person was, but I still think about them sometimes, and I honestly hope they found peace. So, let me tell you what happened. At the time, my ex and I were living in this small one-bedroom apartment, the same one I'm still in now. The building was owned by an older man named Danny, and it had a few little one-bedroom units in it. He got sick with lung cancer, and not long after that, he was gone. It all happened so fast. The place had been in his family for years, passed down from his grandmother, and I'm honestly not sure who owned it before that. A little while after Danny passed, my ex and one of the neighbors, Sherry, who was actually his niece, decided to make a Ouija board and try to contact him. They were hoping for answers, I guess. But neither of them really knew how to use one safely. When I found out, I wasn't thrilled. I'd had bad experiences with Ouija boards before, and I never liked the whole idea of inviting something in and giving it permission to move through you. That never sat right with me. I was always interested in the paranormal, sure, but I preferred other methods. Spirit boxes, things like that. Safer, at least in my mind. Anyway, a couple of days passed and I kind of forgot about the whole thing. Then one night, I got home from work late. I was on an evening shift back then, so it was well after midnight. My ex was still out, and the apartment was completely dark when I walked in. The first thing I noticed was this strange shimmer across the living room floor, like tiny sparks catching the light from outside. I flipped on the lamp and my stomach just dropped. There was glass everywhere. I had this thick tempered glass panel sitting on top of my wooden coffee table, left over from an older table I used to have. And it hadn't just cracked, it had exploded. I mean, there were pieces from one side of the room to the other. I even started recording because my first thought was that somebody had broken in. I checked the whole apartment, of course, but it's a small place. Nobody was there. What really got me was that the center of it all seemed to come from this covered candle that had been used during that Ouija session. That table had taken plenty of wear over time. I'd dropped things on it before. Nothing had ever happened. But this was different. Big chunks had blown outward in every direction. It didn't look like a normal break. It looked violent. When my ex got home, she was just as shaken as I was, and honestly, that was only the beginning. For the next few weeks, things in the apartment got intense. The kind of intense where you start running out of logical explanations and you don't know what to do next. I tried cleansing the place, and, weirdly enough, that seemed to make things worse instead of better. The moment that really pushed me over the edge happened about a week later. We had just come back from grocery shopping. I remember very clearly setting a big bag of cat litter on the kitchen table. I know I did. My ex, Becca, had to run back out to the store because we forgot something, and I stepped outside for a cigarette. My cat was out there with me, sitting near the window. Then, I heard it. That bag had a very specific plastic sound, and I heard it shift, like somebody had picked it up. Then I heard it set down, and a second later, I heard the soft thud of it tipping onto the floor. My cat snapped to attention immediately, ears straight up, staring hard toward the inside of the apartment. I went to the front door, which had a little window in it, and looked through before I stepped inside. That bag of litter was sitting right in the middle of the kitchen floor, not near the table, not half off the edge, in the middle of the floor. And I just stood there staring at it. To make sure I wasn't losing my mind, I called Becca and asked, "Where did I put the litter?" And without hesitation she said, "On the table." Exactly. I started laughing, not because it was funny, but because I was in total disbelief. Just that wild, nervous kind of laugh when your brain can't catch up with what's happening. Then I opened the door and tried to walk back inside. The second I stepped in, I felt something move through me. That's the only way I know how to say it. Something passed right through me. My whole body started shaking uncontrollably. Not for a minute or two either. It went on for hours. Then I started crying, and the strangest part was that the emotion didn't even feel like mine. I remember thinking, why am I crying? I wasn't sad. I was confused, completely baffled. When Becca got home, she asked what was wrong, and all I could say was, I honestly don't know. To this day, it's one of the most bizarre things I've ever experienced. Eventually, someone gave me a few traditional items to try for protection, and little by little, the activity seemed to calm down. Thank God for that, because whatever had been building in here felt heavy, oppressive, like the air itself had weight to it. That's the part I still can't shake. You know how you can walk into a room after people have been arguing, and you can feel the tension before anyone says a word? It was like that, except darker, stronger, like every instinct in your body was trying to warn you that something was off. Personally, I don't believe my ex and Sherry made contact with Danny at all. I think whatever answered them was something else entirely, and I don't think it was harmless. It felt aggressive. It felt mean. And as time went on, it felt like it was getting bolder. That whole experience changed the way I look at this stuff. It sent me down a rabbit hole, honestly. I still find the paranormal fascinating, but after living through that, I also take it a whole lot more seriously than I used to. So I want to tell you about something that's been weighing on me, because I'm genuinely worried about my dad and his family. Up until recently, neither of us really believed in anything paranormal. Not me, not him. It just wasn't something we took seriously. We had never gone through anything that made us think the supernatural was real, so it always felt like the kind of thing that only happened in movies or stories other people told. My dad, Daniel, lives in another state for work, and not long ago he moved out of one house and into another one just a little way down the road. The new place came with a lot more land, which is why the company wanted him there. For the past couple of weeks, he's been slowly settling in, fixing things up, moving boxes, trying to make it feel like home. But he told me that from the very first night, something about that house felt wrong. He says most of the activity happens at night. Sometimes when he's lying in bed, he feels the mattress pressed down near his feet, like someone has sat on the edge of it. But the second he jolts upright, the pressure disappears. Not long after moving in, he also started hearing scratching and pounding inside the walls, and at times, even the windows seemed to rattle hard enough to make him jump. He's not the only one who's noticed it. A couple of people staying in the house have mentioned seeing dark shapes move through the rooms. There have been alarms going off for no reason, cabinets opening and shutting on their own, and loud banging that seems to come from nowhere. My dad tries to stay calm, but I can tell it's getting to him. His wife and her 2 children stay over sometimes, and there were 2 moments in particular that really shook all of them. The first happened one night when everyone was sleeping in the same room. My dad and his wife were in the bed, and the kids, a boy around 10 and a girl around 8, were sleeping on an air mattress nearby. My dad said the banging in the walls started again, louder than usual, and finally, he'd had enough. Wanting to protect his family, He shouted into the room, telling whatever was there to leave, that it was not welcome, and he commanded it to go in the name of Jesus Christ. Right after that, things got quiet. The kids went into the living room and sat on the couch, while my dad and his wife stayed behind in the bedroom for a minute or two, just trying to process what had happened. But when they walked into the living room to check on the children, they found both of them huddled under blankets, completely covered up and terrified. My dad asked what was wrong, and his stepdaughter said she had heard pounding on the front door, like someone was trying to force it open. She also said there was banging at the window, and then she saw a strange light outside, almost like a flashlight shining through. That part really stuck with my dad, because he remembered his grandfather once telling him that spirits can appear with a glow, like a beam of light. We're Hispanic, so maybe that belief comes from stories passed down in the family, but either way, it scared him. The second moment happened when his stepdaughter was taking a shower. When she came out, she asked her mom, "What did you want? Were you calling me?" But her mom looked confused and said she hadn't called her at all. Then she asked her son if he had been knocking on the bathroom door, and he said no, because he knew his sister was in the shower and didn't want to bother her. That's when the little girl explained that while she was bathing, she clearly heard knocking and the sound of someone trying to open the bathroom door. She truly thought someone outside wanted her attention. Around that same time, she also said she saw a woman wearing a long white dress in the house. That image alone gave me chills. My dad ended up going to a local church to speak with a pastor. After hearing everything, the pastor told him it sounded less like random disturbances and more like something dark, possibly demonic. Right now, I think they're trying to arrange for the pastor to come bless or cleanse the home. In the meantime, my dad has been trying to get holy water, and the pastor gave him a Bible verse to read over the house as part of the process. What gets me is that my dad is trying so hard to stay strong. He works these brutal shifts, usually 12 hours or more, and he says staying busy helps keep his mind off it. But eventually, the workday ends, and he still has to drive back to that house. And when he says that part quietly, like he dreads going home, it really gets to me. I can tell he's scared, even if he doesn't say it outright. And I'm scared too, because I keep thinking about what could happen if whatever is there becomes more aggressive. I don't want him, his wife, or those kids to get hurt. That's why I'm sharing this with you. I care about him so much, and I just want to help in any way I can. You know, I've always been a pretty skeptical person. I'm the kind of person who usually looks for the logical explanation first. But there's been something in this house for as long as I can remember, and even now, I still do not fully know what to make of it. One of my earliest memories of it goes back to when I was maybe 7 years old. Back then, my brother and I had bunk beds, and I slept on the bottom. The foot of the bed faced the doorway, so if anything was there, you noticed it right away. I woke up one night and saw this dark figure leaning in through the doorway, just watching me. What stuck with me most was its head. It looked jagged somehow, almost like it had sharp, uneven points or wild hair standing out around it. I remember being scared, but not in a panicked way, more like I just knew I did not want to move. So I turned over and stayed there until I fell back asleep. As I got older, little things kept happening around the house. I would hear my name spoken softly. Lights would switch off when I was alone. A few times, the pull blinds in different rooms snapped upward all at once when I walked in. None of it happened often enough to make daily life impossible, but it happened enough that I stopped being shocked by it. I sort of learned to live with it. Then, about a decade ago, when I was around 21, my cousin and I were sitting in the kitchen late one night, just talking. He was facing the doorway that led out to the mudroom, and it was dark out there. In the middle of our conversation, he suddenly got this strange look on his face, like he was trying to decide whether he should say something. I asked him what was wrong. At first he hesitated, which honestly made it worse. Then he finally told me he had just seen a large figure lean around the doorway and look into the kitchen. And the detail he could not shake was the head. He said it looked oddly pointed, almost spiked. The second he said that, I got chills. I had never forgotten what I saw as a kid, and hearing him describe nearly the same thing without me prompting him was hard to brush off. A few years ago, my wife and I bought the house from my father and moved in. Not long after that, my wife started having her own experiences. She heard her name spoken to her one day in a woman's voice, not shouted from another room, but said quietly, like someone was right there beside her. One of those same blinds I used to see move on their own suddenly shot upward near her too. She has also told me she has seen movement out of the corner of her eye more than once. One night, we were both in bed and a set of keys slid right off the nightstand and hit the floor, even though neither of us was anywhere near it. Then things seemed to pick up even more. Our niece Mara has been staying with us for about a year. A few weeks back, she was in the laundry area and heard someone say, "Hey," right behind her in a female voice. She turned around thinking someone had walked in, but no one was there. Then, not long after that, she told us she woke up and saw a tall, dark figure in her room. She said the shoulders looked uneven, almost slanted, and the head looked strange, fuller somehow, like it had thick, messy hair. A couple of nights later, her friend stayed over and said she saw a figure lean into the bedroom from the doorway. She described it as having a large head, then said it pulled back and vanished. Later that same day, Mara was half asleep during a nap when she heard a young man's voice right in front of her say, "Hey," clearly enough to wake her. That is the part that gets to me now. When I was younger, I only had a handful of experiences I could not explain. But lately, it feels like whatever is here is showing itself more to the people around me than to me. Almost like it wants to be noticed. And that is what unsettles me most. It does not feel human exactly, but it does not feel openly threatening either. It just feels present, like something that has always been here, quietly hovering at the edge of things. And now, for some reason, it is stepping a little closer. I've had this strange thing happen to me, on and off for most of my life. And even now, at 35, I still do not really know what to make of it. The first time it happened, I was 16. I was helping my friend Mara paint her mom's rental house. We were working all day, and at one point I needed something, so I called out her name. When I turned around, I saw what looked exactly like Mara heading into one of the bedrooms, slipping behind those hanging plastic sheets people use while painting. I followed her, talking as I went, and just before I pushed through the plastic, I caught sight of her moving toward the bathroom in the far corner. But when I stepped into the room and looked around, no one was there. I called her name again, louder this time. She answered me from outside the house. That was the first time something like that happened, and it stayed with me. Not long after, there were 2 more incidents close together. One day I walked into the living room and my much older brother was staring at me in this odd, unsettled way. He told me he had just seen me walk past him through the kitchen, across the living room, and into a bedroom. He said he had been talking to me the whole time, but I never answered. The strange part was that I had not gone that way at all. I had just come out from the other side of the house. Then, not long after that, I was having people over. I had run to the store and came back home, but instead of going inside, I stayed out front talking and smoking. A little while later, 2 of my friends came out and asked me if I had gone back into the house since I got home. I told them no. They looked completely serious, and said they had both seen me walk right past them, straight through the house, not saying a word, heading toward my room. They followed me, thinking I was ignoring them, but when they got there, the room was empty, because I had never gone inside at all. After that, everything went quiet for years. Nothing happened from about 18 until I was around 30. By then, I had 2 kids, and they were little, around 5 and 8, and they had a neighborhood friend over all the time. One afternoon, I was out in the garage with that friend's mom, exercising and chatting while the kids played inside. My kids were always calling Mom for one reason or another, so at first, I did not think much of it when I heard them shouting for me. I remember pausing and wondering whether I should go in, but since no one came to get me, I figured they were just wrapped up in their game. A few minutes later, the door swung open and my older daughter came outside looking amazed. She said, "Mom, how did you do that?" I asked her what she meant, and she told me all 3 of them had seen me walking across the living room. They followed me into a bedroom because they wanted drinks, but when they got there, no one was inside. Then she looked at me, standing there in the garage, and could not understand how I had gotten outside so fast. I told her I had been there the whole time. She looked so confused and said, "But Mom, it had your hair." That one really got to me. Then things went quiet again for a while, until this year. I work nights and my partner works days, so our schedules overlap in strange ways. One morning, around 4 a.m., I got a message asking if I had been talking to him through our security cameras. I said no, of course not. He told me he had fallen asleep on the couch and woke up to my voice telling him, very clearly, "Hey, come to bed." At first he thought maybe he was still half asleep, but then he heard it again, sharper this time. It sounded like me, but it was not me. And then just yesterday, I heard my younger daughter's cough coming from her room. She has a very distinct cough, one I would recognize instantly anywhere. But she was not even home. That is what unsettles me most. None of it has ever felt violent or openly threatening. It is just deeply wrong. Like something familiar is passing through the edges of my life, wearing the right face, the right voice, the right shape, but it is never actually the person I know. I know this sounds far out, but the only theory I have, if I let myself drift into the weirdest explanation, is that maybe these are echoes from another version of reality. Almost like different timelines brushing up against each other for a second, and sometimes something slips through. I know how unbelievable that sounds, and maybe there is a perfectly logical explanation for all of it. But after all these years, I still have not found one. I want to tell you something personal. In my family, strange things have a way of showing up, almost like they've been passed down beside eye color and old recipes. My grandma, my sister, my cousins, and me, we've all had moments that still don't sit neatly in my mind. Some of these stories happened to me, and some were told to me by the people I trust most. Either way, they've stayed with me. The first story happened to my little cousin B. She was barely 2 when her parents finally settled into a small mobile home after bouncing from place to place for a while. At first, everything felt calm. It seemed like the kind of place where life might finally steady itself. Then B started chatting with someone no one else could see. Whenever her parents asked who she was talking to, she'd smile and say, "My friend Belle." The thing is, there was no Belle. Nobody in the family, nobody at daycare, nobody they knew. At first, everyone tried to brush it off. She was little after all. But then she started crying and telling her parents Belle was hurting her, even choking her. That was when the mood in the house shifted. B's grandmother, who had always been deeply spiritual, came over to help. She brought in a spirit box and tried to make sense of what might be there. The responses they got were ugly and unsettling, bits of language that didn't feel playful or imaginary at all. Around the same time, B's dad started finding long scratches on his skin with no explanation, and B, who was usually pure sunshine, would suddenly fold into herself and sit in the middle of the floor like she was trying to disappear. Before long, they packed up and left. And once they did, B was herself again. The second story is mine. I was around 4 after my parents divorced, and I spent a lot of nights at my grandma's house where my dad was staying. I wasn't a kid with a huge imagination. I didn't watch scary movies. I didn't go looking for spooky things. But night after night, I had these vivid, awful dreams about a tall man, maybe 6'2" or 6'3", who would stand over me and whisper horrible things. He told me he had killed people I loved. He told me he was going to kill me too. He talked about my pets, my family, everyone I cared about, like he wanted to hollow me out with fear. Eventually, I got so scared of sleeping that I started sleeping in my grandma's room. Even then, I didn't feel safe. Some nights, I would wake up and see a woman in a long navy dress, with dark hair hanging around her face, rushing out of the bathroom, sobbing like her heart had split open. I would scream. My grandma would wake up, and I'd be left shaking so hard I could barely breathe. After I moved away, I never saw either of them again. The third story happened at a family reunion. Every year we gathered at this huge old church school, 3 stories tall, with narrow windows that let you look down into the lower levels. It already had that old building feeling, like every wall had heard too much. One year, my sister, a few cousins, and I snuck upstairs where we absolutely were not supposed to be. We were wandering around, half excited and half nervous, when we heard piano music drifting from one of the rooms. Not random notes either, but a real tune, strange and sad and sharp around the edges. We stepped inside and saw a boy sitting at the piano. That alone made no sense. The building was supposed to be empty. The second he noticed us, he bolted. Of course we ran after him. We chased him down a narrow hallway, and then, just like that, he was gone. No doorway, no stairwell, no place he could have turned. We searched anyway, hearts pounding, but there was nothing. Just silence. The fourth story belongs to my grandma, Cami. When she was young, she had a daughter named Mila. After Mila was born, my grandma started having the same nightmare over and over. In it, she saw a toddler, maybe around 2 years old, lifeless and blue, with water spilling from its mouth. She'd wake up screaming, convinced it was Mila. My grandpa would calm her down, but the dream kept coming back. From then on, she became fiercely protective around water. She never let her guard down, not for a second. Years passed. Mila grew up, became a mother herself, and had 2 daughters, Kinley and Ava. As Mila got older, the nightmares faded, and my grandma started to believe maybe the danger had passed. Then one summer day, Mila took the kids and some family to the lake. She was putting together snacks when she suddenly realized Ava was nowhere in sight. In the next moment, 2 older girls dragged Ava out of the water and onto the shore. Mila went into shock before instinct took over, and she started CPR while Kinley stood nearby, witnessing more than any child should ever have to see. My grandma was called, and Ava was airlifted to the hospital. When my grandma saw her there, she went still. Ava looked exactly like the child from her dream. Ava is me. I'm okay now. I was gone for a few minutes, technically speaking, but I came back. I do carry some damage from it, and I cope with humor more than I probably should. But what stays with me most is what happened after. While I was in the hospital, my grandma told me I talked about seeing mermaids in the water, beautiful women trying to guide me and help me. When I described them, I described relatives who had died before I was born, people I had never met. people I'd never even seen in photos. The last story happened when I was around 10 or 11. I was living with my mom and her ex in this old, pale green house that had to be at least a century old. It was honestly beautiful in the daytime. Big yard, garden, old decorative front door, the kind of place with character in every board and window. But beauty doesn't always mean peace. My room was in the attic, which had been split into two spaces, a larger playroom area and my tiny bedroom tucked off to the side. It was cramped, drafty, and full of little problems, but it was mine, and I made it mine. Posters on the wall, shelves, little decorations, all the things that made me feel tucked in and safe. Then one day, my mom's husband got angry with me and took my door off the hinges. After that, my room opened into the dark attic space, and at night, that darkness felt endless. One evening, I was lying in bed on my phone when I heard something from the other room. I looked up, and there were fingers wrapped around the edge of my doorway. Just fingers, curled there like someone was peeking in. I froze. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe right, just sat there crying silently for what felt like forever until I finally screamed. The hand vanished. Not long after that, my youngest sister came running out of her room sobbing, saying something had sprinted across her floor. She was so young that the fear on her face felt real in a way I couldn't explain away. Around that same time, I started hearing a tiny voice near my ear at night, whispering, "Hello," so softly it almost felt polite. It stole my sleep bit by bit. I spiraled into a depression during that time, and I swear the house felt heavier the worse I got, like it fed on sadness. Eventually, my sister and I used a spirit box in that house too. One of the clearest things we heard was a little boy saying, "Sorry, Mommy." Later, after digging into the history of the place, we found stories about a woman who had suffered multiple miscarriages and eventually taken her own life. The attic was the part that always stuck with me. That was where the air felt wrong. So that's my family's strange little collection of stories. Some people will hear all of this and call it coincidence, grief, dreams, old houses making old noises. Maybe some of it is. I'm open to that. But when you live through things that sit this close to your skin, it gets harder to dismiss them completely. All I know is this: some moments leave a chill behind long after they're over. And some stories, once they enter a family, never really leave.